I would call the afternoon session to order and just touch base with the clerks. Jane, we have a quorum, correct? Thank you. So now we turn to Article 21, to see if the town will authorize the following acquisition of capital assets, to wit, A, replacement of a 2008 police cruiser and a 2011 police cruiser, combined cost of approximately $84,000. B, replacement of a 1995 726A grader, approximately $340,000. And C, replacement of a 2003 dump truck, approximately $208,000, at an estimated total cost of $632,000, and to finance the same through debt instruments other than bonds for a term not to exceed 5 years. The chair would recognize Ms. O'Connor.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town authorize the following acquisition of capital assets, to wit, A, replacement of a 2008 police cruiser and a 2011 police cruiser, combined cost of approximately $84,000. B, replacement of a 1995 726A grader, approximately $340,000. And C, replacement of a 2003 dump truck, approximately $208,000, at an estimated total cost of $632,000, and to finance the same through debt instruments other than bonds for a term not to exceed 5 years. And I'd like to speak to the motion.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded as just stated by Ms. O'Connor, and the chair would call on Ms. O'Connor.
Thank you. The Select Board is recommending the replacement of these 4 vehicles basically because they've all reached the end of their life cycle. There were a list of recommendations that we received from the department heads in both the Public Works Department and the Police Department. These were some of the most compelling replacements that they needed. So we saw them as well worth replacing. That's the Reader's Digest version. We can answer more questions if you need to.
Is there further debate with regard to the current motion relative to Article 21? Ms. Kornheiser.
Emily Kornheiser, District 1. The explanation this week about how the police cars are driven, so they're driven constantly, was a very compelling argument for why they need to be replaced so often. But I'd like to hear more about why the police officers don't walk anywhere. I know, for instance, for me, when I'm trying to get from one side of downtown to the other, it's actually usually faster to walk. And I know that walking beats often have a great community service attached to them. Thank you.
Further discussion or debate with regard to this question?
Ms. Moderator.
Mr. Gartenstein.
I'd actually like to point out that with the goal of increasing community policing presence, officers are required to spend time patrolling on foot downtown. And so that's a regular part of every officer's shift.
Further questions or debate with regard to Article 21? Ms. Baboulas.
Dora Baboulas, District 3. I don't have any issues with these expenditures. I know Steve's been trying to get the dump truck for a while now. And they're all needed. What I'm thinking about is I'm looking ahead at the capital plan in 2017, and I'm noticing how many things are there, and I know a lot of that is because it keeps getting put off. Having been on that side of the table, the question is, how long can we keep doing that before it all sort of explodes and comes to a head and we have situations like we do this year with some of these expenditures, which are really things that needed to be done, but waited until they were like, emergencies, and now we have to get them to do in the last couple of articles that we dealt with. So it's really more sort of like I'm looking at it and thinking, ooh, this looks really ominous, looking at 2017. So the question is, do we even need more in this article in order to prevent it from becoming an emergency situation a couple of years down the road?
Does anyone for the administration wish to respond? Mr. Elwell.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. For those of you who were at the information meeting on Monday evening, it's those kinds of questions that we hope to be able to answer in a very clear, hopefully compelling manner when we've completed the comprehensive review and prepared a long-term financial plan. We absolutely can't go forward with $2 million worth of needs and $1 million worth of funding year after year, obviously. But it isn't necessary that you put more funding into this particular item in this particular meeting, because we need to go through that exercise to make sure that we're going to step up our rate of capital replacement in a prudent manner. And we've got work to do in the next several months to make sure that we can make recommendations to you that will address that need in that manner.
I believe there was another question in the back. Yes, sir.
Dylan McKinnon, District 2, and I apologize this question had been addressed in the Wednesday information. I wasn't able to attend that one due to prior commitments. The police vehicles and other various pieces of town equipment being replaced, presumably they still run. Are they to be, as they're retired, are they to be sold? If they're sold, where do the proceeds of the sale go to? Does it go back into the general fund, or is it earmarked for whichever department that the vehicle came from? And I'll take my question to my seat. Thank you.
Is there a member of the administration that can respond to Mr. McKinnon's question? Mr. Elwell.
Generally speaking, the trade-in value of each piece of equipment is part of the transaction and acquiring it, so it just reduces the amount of the expenditure. In any instance where we purchase a piece of equipment and separately sold the one it's replacing, those funds would be general revenue into the general fund.
Further questions? Mr. Wilmerding.
John Wilmerding, 2nd District. You would have heard this question in passing, I think, if there had been a Finance Committee meeting regularly. When I was reading about the cruisers a couple months ago, I think in the same day or two, space of a day or two, it was also in the news that Vernon was selling its police cruisers and couldn't find buyers. I'm just wondering if anyone in the administration had looked into the possibility that any of those cruisers would have sufficed.
Is there anyone within the, okay, Mr. Gartenstein will yield to the Chief Fitzgerald.
Thank you. Chief Fitzgerald, Brattleboro Police Department. That's a very good question, and what a lot of people don't understand when you're dealing with first responder or emergency vehicles is the idle time. So unless the vehicle actually had an hour counter, approximately anywhere from 45 to 60 miles for every hour that a vehicle idles. You can tack that onto your mileage for the wear and tear of the engine. So if we did buy a used vehicle, even though the odometer might have said 50, 60,000 miles, in reality, its life could be upward to 180 to 200,000 miles. So we do our best to stay away from used vehicles and basically get new vehicles, because then it boils down that officers are responding to calls, and it very easily could be a safety issue. That answer your question?
Further discussion or questions relative to this article? Yes, sir.
What debt instruments do you use to fund these? You don't use bonds. What do you use?
Member of the administration is interrogated.
Banknotes, and what we do is go to multiple banks and have them each bid on the needs that we have, so that we go with whoever gives us the lowest interest rates.
The question is on Article 21. Is there further debate? The question is, shall the town authorize the following acquisition of capital assets, to wit, A, replacement of the 2008 police cruiser and a 2011 police cruiser, combined cost of approximately $84,000, B, replacement of a 1995 726A grader, approximate cost $340,000, and C, replacement of a 2003 dump truck, approximately $208,000, at an estimated total cost of $632,000, and to finance the same through debt instruments other than bonds for a term not to exceed 5 years. Are you ready for the question? Mr. Phillips.
Steve Phillips again, District 3. So I haven't seen a warning item quite worded like this before. I have full confidence that the board's going to use its best effort to get the best deals. But for instance, if my wife tells me, oh, the car's going to cost about $32,000, it always costs more. So an estimated $632,000, should we expect that that's going to be a not to exceed? And I'm just curious why it was worded this way, because it tends to suggest that you can pretty much spend whatever you want. I guess that's a question.
Is there a member, once again, of the administration, Mr. Elwell, who would respond to Mr. Phillips' question?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mr. Phillips, the reason for the wording this way is because the items need to go to bid, and they're going to be purchased out of the capital fund. So there are always, in any given fiscal year, going to be some items that come in a little over and some items that come in a little under. If these particular, and there are other things that will be purchased from the capital fund in the coming fiscal year for which we will not be borrowing. So if these 4 items together come in a little bit over 632, we still won't be spending more than the total amount authorized for expenditure from the capital fund for the fiscal year, based on your action today.
Great, thank you.
Further questions? Mr. Penman.
Bill Penniman, District 3. Looking at the capital budget, there are 2 other items in there that aren't in this article. Are those still planning to be purchased, and how are they being purchased?
Mr. Elwell.
Okay, thank you. Yes, they are, and with cash, with revenues in real time from this fiscal year.
Further questions on the motion? The motion is, okay. The motion is, shall the town authorize the following acquisition of capital assets? Replacement of a 2008 police cruiser and a 2001 police cruiser, combined cost of approximately $84,000. Replacement of a 1995 726A grader, approximately $340,000. And replacement of a 2003 dump truck, approximately $208,000, at an estimated total cost of $632,000, and to finance the same through debt instruments other than bonds for a term not to exceed 5 years. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, you may be seated, and you have adopted Article 21. Article 22, to see if the town will assess a 1% local option sales tax in accordance with 24 VSA Section 138. The chair recognizes Mr. Scholes.
I move that the town assess a 1% local option sales tax in accordance with 24 VSA Section 138.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded that the town assess a 1% local option sales tax in accordance with 24 VSA Section 138. Is there any debate? Mr. Dimes. Well, Mr. Dimes has chosen to ask to cease debate, and that's a privileged motion which there's a second to the motion to cease debate. Okay. That takes priority over any debate, and so I'm going to call upon you now to all those who are in favor of ceasing debate on Article 22, please rise. You may be seated. All those who are opposed to ceasing debate, please rise. You may be seated, and debate will continue. Is there any debate? Is there any further question? Mr. Bosworth.
Peter Cooper, District
Excuse
1.
me.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
I'm sorry, I misstated your name, Mr. Cooper. Go ahead.
Okay. There's been a fair amount of publicity for reasons not to support this 1% option tax from the Chamber of Commerce, from letters to the editor, from emails and so forth. I'd like to run through a few reasons I think we should support it. First of all, and my own feeling is that Brattleboro's property tax is extremely high. I've gone on the State Department of Tax website and tried to find where Vermont stands. I may not have found the definitive document, but I did find something that shows Brattleboro as number 5 out of 240 towns. I think we pay too much in property tax. Secondly, I think it's important to look at what this option tax would do for us. It's been estimated we would get $600,000. That's, as I understand it, after we send roughly a third to Montpelier. If we administered it ourselves, we'd get the whole amount. We already have a meals and rooms tax, which generates about $320,000 a year. We don't get the administrative part of that. Those could be lumped together, and we could do the administrative part for both of those. And we're up around $1 million that way, maybe more. There's some people who have said that the 1% option tax is a regressive tax, and I admit that it is in some ways regressive, but I don't feel it is very regressive. There's a document that the Chamber put out which lists the things that would be taxed and also the things that would not be taxed. There are 46 items that would not be taxed, and they really provide a safety net for people with the lowest incomes. Heating, fuel, gas obviously is taxed in a separate way, food, most clothing, non-prescription drugs, medical devices, and so forth. So I think there's a way that is built into that provides a safety net for low-income people. And finally, who would pay this? People, the 30,000 plus people who are in Brattleboro during the weekdays, from Dummerston, Townsend, Guilford, Marlborough, et cetera, who use our sidewalks, our lighting, our police, our fire, our roads, and on, but don't pay any tax. That's one group. Then there's a large group, probably much, much larger, that are here from time to time as tourists. I'm thinking of strolling of the heifers, I'm thinking of the monthly gallery walk, the 2 film festivals we have, the literary festival, the people who come to the New England Youth Theater, the museum, the Latches, which now has events that pull in people from elsewhere. These people don't pay any tax. We need to spread the burden. And I've heard that plea almost yearly from this body, that we have to find a way where more people are contributing something toward the costs of running this town. So those are the reasons I support the tax. Thank you.
Further debate, Ms. Southworth.
Jane Southworth, District 2. In the interests of shortening debate, I second everything that Peter Cooper had to say. And Andy Davis sent out a letter to the reps, and I would like to agree with everything that was in that. So I support this tax, and thank you both for saying what I needed to say.
Further debate. Mr. McElhaney.
Kevin McElhaney, District 1. I imagine there could be worse ideas for the benefit of the town than raising the sales tax, and it wouldn't be a 1% raise in the sales tax at a 6% sales tax. It would be about a 17% hike in the sales tax. So there might be worse ideas, but I would be hard-pressed to think of them. While it's been stated that other people would be paying a significant portion of the tax, the fact remains, and I would hope we would want us as residents to patronize our local businesses. And that would mean that we would be paying for the sales tax. And earlier this morning, I heard discussions of what we do sitting around the family table with the budget at a time where, you know, I've heard that there's an economic recovery, but I'm in the financial business myself. I'm still looking for it. And when my wife, who does all the hard work in budgeting in our house, tells us what we have, one of the things that doesn't come to mind is, geez, I think we have some extra money to give to the town government for all of the vital services that it performs. That's really not our priority. And earlier this morning, too, when discussing the school budget, we heard of the many problems, and I agree totally, brought about by poverty in the community. It is a serious situation. Wouldn't we want to encourage a business, an entrepreneurial class, to either stay here or come here that would contribute to economic growth, create jobs, perhaps lift some people out of poverty? And a final consideration, we're not doing this in a vacuum. We are not smack dab in the middle of Vermont, where the prices might be 1% higher. Our competition is a state across the river that has 0 sales tax, and a state just to the south of us that has a smaller sales tax than we do. Do we, at a time where we just lost a major private employer, and we've demonstrated in past years that perhaps we're not the most business-friendly region around, would we want to add to the burden of local job creators and entrepreneurs by increasing their costs? I would strongly urge a vote against this tax. Thank you.
Further debate. Mr. Chapman.
Mr. Moderator, I'm here to talk, even though I know that this issue has been well ventilated already. But I feel a responsibility to say something about this because I was on the select board that voted to put this in front of the voters in the first place several years ago. And I've changed my position. I voted for it. I thought it was a great idea. I've had more time to think about it, and I've had more conversations with merchants. And what changed my mind was the fact that I had not realized the extent to which our merchants in Brattleboro have competition from the internet. The various arguments for this are quite strong. We do need money. However, we also need our downtown retail community. And it's hard to make a living. I do notice that the brand new Brooks House complex, which has absolutely lovely space for commercial activity, still has 2 vacancies. And I'm a little uncomfortable about that, being really enthusiastic about a healthy Main Street. I recall one conversation in particular with a merchant I do a lot of business with, and he pointed out that oftentimes people come into his store, try stuff on, decide what they like, and then go buy it on the internet. This is a person who has competition in Keene that's doing very well, much more than his on the same line of goods. I think it would be a mistake to see this as low-hanging financial fruit for the town. The short term, yes. Long term, no. I think that in Vermont and in other similar areas where business has, manufacturing business has gradually winked out and gone elsewhere, that we have to be taking a look at the long throw, at the 100-yard line, not the 10-yard line, as we are with this question right now. I believe that it would be in the best interests of the town to defeat this. It's already been defeated once in a townwide vote. It's been defeated in representative town meeting before, and I think we would all be wiser to continue to turn it down. Regrettably, it would mean at the sacrifice of some revenue that looks easy. However, I think it would be short-sighted.
Further debate. Ms. Tarnas.
Catherine Turnus, District 3. I guess my first response is how many times we're going to kick this can around the block. It has been voted down. As Chris just said, I think this is the second time it's gone before and the voters been kicked out. I work with as a chair of the Brattleboro Senior Meals, I work with a group of very vulnerable people who live on their Social Security. And some of them may be lucky to have pensions, some of them just live on their Social Security. They, after conversations with many of them, they don't shop downtown. They go across the river because it's cheaper for them to do that. They can't afford to shop here now that exists. You do this and they won't be here at all. And I have lived in several states across this country, in several cities. And every time there was a sales tax involved, it hurt the poor people.
Further debate on the question. This woman right there, yes, please. I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Georgia Morgan,
Georgia
District
Morgan.
2. I kind of wonder if, in thinking about this issue, some people aren't making the right comparison. It seems like what's being compared is a sales tax of 0% versus a sales tax of 6 or 7%. But the issue before us is not 6 or 7%, it's 1%. And what that means is on a purchase of $75 worth of books, say, that's 75 cents. On a purchase of a large ticket item, like a fancy refrigerator, $1,700 refrigerator, well, that's a $17 difference. Is a person who is otherwise inclined to shop in Brattleboro really going to say, well, 75 cents is too much, I'm going to buy it online and pay $6 shipping? Thank you.
Further debate? Mr. Barber, you've had your hand up for quite a while. Mr. Barber.
A couple of points. It's a scary proposition for all of us. The downtown merchants are understandably concerned. I'm concerned. Carol and I live primarily on Social Security. We have a few investments. We hope they will last until we both die at the age of 105. I'm thinking back to my days as a solo practitioner, as a freelance editor. I used to be a book publisher here in this town. And the big problem for book publishers still is how to make a profit. And when a project would be proposed to us by an author, and later on when I began advising authors who wanted to get a publisher to accept their project, I would ask them to think like a publisher. And authors are beginning to do that now by self-publishing. Now, I'll get to the point here in a minute. One of the first questions any entrepreneur should ask himself or herself is, who is your market? In the case of a book, what kinds of people will either walk into the bookstore or go to Amazon in this day and age and look for your book? Well, you have to identify the interests of those people. I'm very interested every time the BDCC has a business proposal contest and awards grants for the best proposal. If someone comes to them and says, my market is not only the local community, but tourists who we all know are notoriously fickle, they turn on a dime the minute you ask them to pay 1 cent more and go where they don't see that. Or maybe they don't do that. We've terrified ourselves for a long time with the absence of the people who come to this town for other reasons and spend their money here. Now, a couple of days ago, I sent a general email to the administration asking for an estimate of cost to this town if such a tax were instituted, a cost to this town to administer the tax itself and collect it itself. I'm no lover of this tax, but I am not in love with the notion that it's not just a notion, it's the fact that this town is not resilient. We talk a lot about resilience these days. We know we need to be resilient at what comes onto us out of the sky, because all bets are off now. Nobody knows how the weather works anymore. And we all know what that means, both in terms of summer and in terms of winter. We do not have, and this is going to be a separate issue, and you can rule me out of order, but We have a bunch of first responders here, both of whom are under conditions where they are not resilient. And we've got to do something about that. So I'm looking to the administration to tell us, what if we were to institute this tax and not send any money at all to Montpelier, because I don't believe this 1/3 business is what it would take to administer this tax. I'll bet we could do it cheaper, but I'd like to hear you tell us about that and show me where I'm wrong.
All right. Mr. Barber, Mr. Elwell would like to address some of the comments that you've made, so the chair will recognize the town manager.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mr. Barber, first, thank you and the others who were emailing with you over the last couple of days for giving us a heads up to this, because it helped us be prepared to answer this today. We did some research over the last couple of days. And the answer for today's purposes is we can't, because under the statute that applies to the local option sales tax, as it does to communities who exercise a local option for rooms and meals, as Brattleboro has in the past, the provisions are fixed in the statute. You have to work through the state, and the state does keep the large share of the revenue that comes from that. However, there are two cities in Vermont that have instituted, Rutland City being one and Burlington the other, a rooms, meals, and entertainment tax that they did not under the statute, but under terms of their own charters. What we don't know, because we just researched this yesterday and determined what the answer would be for today's purposes, but we can look further into it if the body is interested in further considering this at some future time. We don't know how likely it would be that Brattleboro's charter might be approved for a change that would allow us to locally implement such a tax and locally administer and collect it. It seems reasonable. There is a precedent for it, but both of the places that have done it are under city charters as opposed to town charters. There's a lot here that we don't know today that we need to look at further. But for today's purposes, it's unequivocally clear that if the body approves this, it will be under the state statutes and subject to the state administration and the related fee.
Further debate on the issue. Mr. Stromberg.
Christian Stromberg, District 1. I'm one of the businesses that relocated here to Brattleboro, having won a BDCC prize. I also have a retail store in here in town, not in downtown. And I've had people leave once they found out they could buy my liquor in New Hampshire. And I said, it's the same price. And they said, but there's no sales tax. And yet they were already at my store. So it does happen. And I'm reluctant to tell people you can actually drive across the river to that beautiful, large liquor store that probably everybody's seen, and probably have forgotten about our liquor store, which is actually in the Rite Aid. So compare the two when you look at what retail looks like in a state that's advertising tax-free versus what we've got. And this keeps coming up because it's one of our, as we say, the only way we can change what we tax is the 1% option. And since we have a large number of our legislatures here, that we need to look at what I've mentioned in another meeting about the large chunk of our property that is not paying any tax, and that how we have no recourse. They're tax exempt from property tax, yet they do pull a great deal of services and demand a lot of services that they aren't really contributing to, and that this may need to be a legislative issue that, at least for police, fire, roads, they need to pay something. More than they are, because we have a lot of demands. Right now I look at the roads and I say, we're not paying enough. We're not putting enough into infrastructure. You shouldn't come to a point where a hole drops out of a bridge. We're not being preventive enough. And there's a good chunk of real estate in this town that doesn't pay anything, or very little. And that needs to change. And the fairness aspect, well, it's a shared burden, and they need to share the burden with us. That's all.
Ms. Bublis.
Thank you, Dora Bubalis, District 3. I'm first going to mention the fact, because it's been asked by someone else who's not a member of this body, to please mention the fact that there was a townwide vote in which people voted down the idea of a 1% sales tax. So just wanted to get that out there. We have a really, really, really fragile retail economy and restaurants. We do. And there are other places that actually have a stronger economy in which businesses are going out of business. When you go down to Northampton, there's probably been about 5 stores that have closed the last year in restaurants. One of the biggest stores in downtown Northampton is closing in probably a month. That's a place that has a much larger population and a lot more money and a lot more tourists. So the idea that we can sustain an increase, even if it is only mostly a psychological effect because it's not that huge amount of money. It's just sheer ludicrousy to be on a border of a non-tax state and increase taxes. It just doesn't make any sense. The other thing is that what you gain from having the 1% sales tax, you have to sort of measure it out, and we've already heard from the town manager that they don't really have any idea what effect this is. When property owners have trouble renting their spaces and they then have to lower their rent, they then come to the town and ask for a reassessment of the value of their property. That means that they pay less taxes in property taxes. So the question is, what's the mathematical formula for how much you gain versus how much you lose? I don't know that exists. If you end up with a downtown that has a lot of empty storefronts because businesses aren't making it, the tourists stop coming. They go somewhere else because it doesn't look pretty to them. And there's not as much options for them. So all of the things that you've worked on to build up this economy in which tourists are coming and it's really great can disappear pretty darn quickly if the town doesn't look a certain way and have the kinds of options that those folks are looking for. Finally, I want to say that I have heard this issue of the list of things that are taxable versus the things that are non-taxable, and that, it's not so regressive because, after all, poor people only buy necessities. Lots of low-income people have very, very strong needs to buy things that are on that list of things to be taxed. Why should they only be making choices to buy things that they absolutely barely need and not to have some choice in their lives? And the fact of the matter is, a lot of those folks who are low income don't have any other option but to shop in town. Some of them take the bus over to Walmart, but they also shop in town and buy a lot of things in town. It's highly offensive to just think that we should be saying that they shouldn't have to buy those things.
Further debate on this issue. Ms. Megas Russell.
Hey there, I'm Emily Megas Russell, District 1. I just had a couple of thoughts. The first one is I'm a little suspicious of the argument around, I think clearly there's strength to it, but the argument around folks leaving town due to a 1% increase in tax. I think it's comparing like apples and oranges, or maybe apples and clementine, or oranges and clementines or something. But I think people are leaving town. You can't really compare Walmart and Sam's. The price point is just not comparable. And it's difficult to go to Brattleboro downtown and buy something you need. It's doable to buy a gift for somebody, but it's difficult to buy something you actually need. So I think it's a slightly separate issue. Certainly it impacted by this, but I'm a little suspicious of it. My other point is that if this were to get voted in, I would recommend to the select board and the town to do a creative marketing job of helping people choose shopping locally by helping them understand how something like a 1% increase actually goes back to invest in their town in things like town services. So it's not, taxes get a bad rep, sure, understandably, but for services that we need. So it's a loop that I think we're not really fully connecting. And much like New Hampshire advertises its tax-free status, we could advertise a very long-standing Vermont tradition, which is to buy locally, and we could create that loop. And potentially, if we're creative and active enough, we could potentially drive business to local businesses. So, whether it's voted in or not, we should do that.
Further debate. Ms. McKinney.
Prudence McKinney, District 1. I guess I feel that this is really the wrong meeting to have the debate. It's on the warning, and so, we are talking about it, but I think when it was put on the warning, we thought that there would be new police fire expenses in the budget as well. And now that, we have a new town manager in place and he's planning to do a major review of the operations of the town and so on, we may find ourselves in just in a different situation or debating, other ways to look at our budget. And I would like to say other ways to raise revenue, but unfortunately there are no other ways to raise revenue. I wanted to also correct the first speaker. Massachusetts has a 6.25 sales tax. I just looked it up on my smartphone. And I also agree that we need to remember that we're looking at a 6 or a 7% sales tax, not a 0% compared to a 7%. And I think the big question is, will 1% change behavior? And I don't think it wouldn't change my behavior, but I don't really have the answer. I think it's very tough to vote this in. I think at some point we may have to. I don't think that point is right now. And I guess that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
All the way in the back. Yes, ma'am. No, you, yes, thank you. Sorry, I don't know your name.
I'm Ann Senny, District 1. And I wanted to, I guess, echo what Ms. Magus Russell said. I voted against this tax a couple of times. I support it today. I was a merchant here, downtown business owner for 20 years, and I just closed my business. And when I voted against this tax in the past, it was because I felt that the situation was that precarious for merchants in town. At the same time, I want to say that I also think that there's a little bit of hysteria here. I can't tell you how many times I did transactions as a merchant and got to the point where I gave the sales receipt to the person, and they said, "Oh, there's no sales tax?" They had no awareness even of it. And I really don't think it changes behavior. I think perception is, the psychological effect is big. And I agree that a shop local campaign would really make a big difference. I mean, for my business, I felt there was no more disposable income. This town has a poverty issue and a property tax issue. I'm also trying to sell my house, and the main response I get is, "What are your taxes?" It's not selling. It's just, it's pretty outrageous. It's not manageable, and there is no disposable income. So I am supporting this tax. I think I've been convinced over the last year that we have capital expenditures that we have to make, and we need money for it, and this is a way to get it. We need to manage the tax and sell it, but I really believe we need to enforce it. Thanks.
Further debate? Mr. Harvey.
George Harvey, District 3. 30 some odd years ago, I was a single parent of 4 children, and I lived in Winchester, New Hampshire. We never came to Brattleboro to shop, and the reason was because Brattleboro had a tax rate of 5.5%. Now, the tax rate in Brattleboro has gone up, the tax rate in New Hampshire has not. And we're talking about raising the tax rate in New Hampshire again. I mean, in Vermont, with a 1% addition It's not 1% tax, it's 1% more. And when you compare 7% or 6% with nothing, either way, it's a bad comparison for a person who doesn't have a lot of money. Right now, I live in Brattleboro, I work in Brattleboro, I have almost no money, and I do my shopping in Brattleboro. The only time I ever leave Brattleboro to do shopping is when I absolutely cannot get what I want here. But the reason for that is primarily because I'm poor. I don't have a car. Now, I've heard a lot about poverty from the people in the school department, and it's really kind of scary to think that we've got that many children in that bad shape. We do need to raise money. Taxes, yeah, we can raise money by taxes. But what we really need to do in this town is to get down and do something about getting an income as a community. We've got to stop people from being poor. And the way that we do that is by bringing money into the town or preventing money from going out. And having taxes is going to mean that people go elsewhere, so the money doesn't come in. I honestly cannot support this for the simple reason that I've been there when it comes to shopping. I was in Winchester. It was easier for me, and it was closer for me, and it was a shorter drive to get to Brattleboro. But I always went to Keene because it was always cheaper in Keene. Now, I want to remind this body that every year, $24 million is spent on electricity, and almost all of that goes out of this area, and almost all of that goes out of this state, and a lot of it goes out of this country. But we could be generating that electricity here using renewable power. I want to point out the SPEED program in Vermont has, in its 10 years, got to a point where it's providing 895 gigawatt hours per year, which is almost half of what Vermont ever bought from Vermont Yankee. We can do that. We've got the resources to get money coming into Brattleboro and staying in Brattleboro. And talking about and executing 1% tax is not going to get us out of poverty. Thank you.
Further debate. Mr. Wheelock.
Marshall Wheelock, District 2. I'm torn on how to vote on this because each side has such good arguments and I can poke holes in each side's argument. So it really leaves me up a tree, as they say. But then I stop to think, this is the annual representative town meeting. This very month, the free citizens of Brattleboro voted against the 1% tax. And I think that's going to have to control how I vote on this. Thank you.
Further debate. Ms. Burke.
Molly Burke, District 2. I'm opposed to this tax. I know we have a fragile economy downtown. There are very structural problems, I think, in the state. Probably most of you know that big issue in the legislature this year is property taxes and the declining student enrollment. So there are bills in the House right now about how to deal with that. I don't know if it's going to, what impact that will have to be. I think one of the other issues is in terms of, generally in terms of taxes, what people, and I don't know if anything's going to be able to happen with this year, but that people, lower and middle income people are paying more in proportion of their incomes in property taxes than people at the higher income levels. So I think there are just a lot of problems. This issue, to me, it pits property owners against downtown businesses, and I think that there are bigger issues. It's in the context of much bigger issues, structural budget problems, healthcare costs that are rising for state and school employees, in some cases 18% per year. So these are a lot of bigger problems that feed into this. And I just feel at this point, this tax is not really the solution. Thank you.
Further debate. Mr. Robarge, you've had your hand up.
George Roberts, District 1. I was going to mention what Marshall said. 1959 is, I think, was when representative town meeting started. And I can't imagine the people who, put that all together what they would think to have us here 3 weeks after a vote of town-wide that people turn this down. I'm in retail, in gasoline, and people will drive across town to save 2 or 3 cents a gallon, when ultimately it amounts to probably 20 cents in their tank. It's really, they'll wait in line. So we've all played maybe we haven't, but the game Jenga, when you push one block out, and that one block's not going to do anything. And then we push another block. So this is just one more block, and somebody's going to push another block, and this whole thing's going to crumble. So I think if we just leave it where it is, maybe let our town manager and our select board do their job, maybe they're going to find a resolution other than sending people over the river. Thank you.
Further debate. Mr. Davis?
Andrew Davis, District 3. Thanks for having this conversation. I wrote a little thing that some of you got in the email, and I do think the chances of this passing today are very unlikely, considering the public vote. But I think it is a really important discussion. And the difference between Australian ballot and representative town meeting is we're discussing the issue, not just voting it down. We've heard from the school department that we're not overspending. And I know when we get to the town budget, we're going to probably hear the same thing. We're not overspending. We spent the morning looking at all the capital expenses we have coming at us and the ones that are with us right now. We have a revenue problem. Don't forget that renters pay property tax. Rents are high in this town. We need property tax relief, and we need to balance things out. I voted against the 1% in the past, and I've changed my mind. We talk a lot about the arts in this town. George talked about bringing money to Brattleboro. Wow, I have been in the Latches Theater numerous times this year to a packed house of people who have money to spend. But they come to Brattleboro and they go home and they don't leave much behind for us. We have a local option tax that raises $300,000. I stop in and take out food at a business on Main Street and I pay a tax, and I just pay it because I'm getting what I want. I need some food to feed my daughter quickly in a busy day, and I don't go, oh, what's the 1% on that? What's the rooms and meals tax on that? Because I'm getting value for my dollar. I believe from the discussions I've had that the reason people don't shop in downtown has nothing to do with the sales tax. And someone else has already said that more eloquently than I can. I've bought bicycles for my kids on Main Street instead of going to Walmart. I was looking for quality. Maybe not everyone has that, but the reason some people go to Walmart is because the cost of the bicycle is so much less, not because of the sales tax. And let's not forget, this is the last thing I want to say, even though I could keep going, I won't. I'll say the last thing. I am so tired of hearing the phrase tax-free New Hampshire. New Hampshire has roads, schools, towns. They raise money. They figured out how to get people to scurry across the border, leave their money behind, and run away back to their home state. They do it all around their state except with Maine, where Maine has a sales tax. New Hampshire is not tax-free. The businesses in New Hampshire pay their business taxes with their customers' money because that's how you run a business, okay? We have Vermont state law. If you're buying a bicycle in Keene and you plan to ride it in Vermont, you owe use tax on it. And if you're signing your tax form at the end of the year, you're signing with your name that you paid the use tax on it. That's Vermont state law. A lot of the arguments today are arguments against a sales tax. We live in Vermont. We have a sales tax. It's not going away. Many towns in Vermont have adopted local option taxes, and there was an article just last fall from Wilmington about how great it's going, their local option tax. They really needed the revenue. They're enjoying having it. I know they're not right on the border, but I really believe that if we don't find another solution for revenue, this is an option we have. We're a destination town. People come here again and again and again for the quality of the experience, and we need to find a way for them to help support the services that they expect to find when they get here. And I don't want to live in a town with dilapidated police and fire services. Thank you.
You want to respond to that?
Whenever I turn.
Okay. I want to see if I can find some people who have not spoken. Well, I think we've about hit just about, oh, all the way in the back, yes. Oh, that's okay, come on up.
Dwight Holmes, District 1. I think we've had a good debate here, and I'd like to move the debate is closed.
Call the question.
Question, thank you.
Is there a second? Okay, that calls for, that is non-debatable, to cease debate. All those in favor of ceasing debate on the issue of the 1% sales tax, please rise. You may be seated. All those who are opposed to ceasing debate, please rise. The ayes appear to have it, the ayes do have it, and you have ceased debate on the main motion. So we return to a vote on the main motion, which is, shall the town assess a 1% local option sales tax in accordance with 24 VSA Section 138? All those in favor, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. The noes appear to have it. The noes. There has been a call for division. All those who are in favor of the motion for a 1% local option sales tax, please rise and remain standing until your vote has been counted. Yes, we're doing this.
And the signers have to sign every single one. It's awful for them.
Okay. You may be seated. All those who are opposed to the motion to assess a 1% local option sales tax, please rise and remain standing until you are counted. Listen to the results of your vote. 44 voting yes and 78 voting no, and you have defeated Article 22. We now move to Article 23 to see how much money the town will raise, appropriate, and expend to defray its expenses and liabilities. Moderator recognizes Mr. Gartenstein.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the Select Board be authorized to raise, appropriate, and expend the sum not to exceed $15,307,899 in order to defray to that extent all general fund expenses for the period July 1, 2015 through June 30, 2016, including all highway and Windham County taxes, and that the Select Board be authorized to expend in addition any sum authorized for special purpose under any article contained in the warning for this meeting or any special representative town meeting. This motion includes the following funding sources: $96,265 to be appropriated from the unassigned general fund balance, $13,473,675 to be collected in property taxes, and the balance to be comprised of all other sources of revenue collected by the town. This motion also provides that the town taxes assessed on the grand list as of April 1, 2015 shall be due and payable in 4 equal installments payable to the town treasurer until overdue, then to the collector of taxes, that such payment of the installment shall be made on or before 5 p.m. on August 17, 2015, November 16, 2015, February 16, 2016, and May 16, 2016, and that interest at a rate of 1% per month be charged from the due date of payment on any overdue payment of the town tax, installment, or portion thereof, and that a penalty of 8% be charged on any overdue payment that remains due and owing on May 17, 2016. And I request please to speak to the motion.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded that the Select Board be authorized to raise, appropriate, and expend the sum not to exceed $15,307,899 as moved by Mr. Gardenstein. The chair would recognize Mr. Gardenstein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to provide some overview about the budget. We had a discussion at an informational town meeting, so I'm sorry if I'm boring the people who were there on Monday, but I guess this is the main event, so we'll provide some of that same information again. The town report contains a total budget item of around $15,550,700,000. And I'm going to be speaking today to the motion that I've just made that calls for total expenses, total expenditures by the town in the general fund, including the capital fund, of approximately $550,000. Our goal in forming this budget, beginning in October and working through January, was essentially to provide for a level service budget. We went through very significant efforts last year, reviewing services, both leading up to the initial vote at March town meeting, and then following the referendum where the budget was rejected and then had to be represented to town meeting. And so last year we went through extensively potential service cuts, potential cuts in personnel. And I think through the process last year, March through June of 2014, we concluded as a community that we weren't prepared, at least at this time, to make serious cuts in services. And we talked about those potential cuts last year. We knew, preparing this budget, that a new town manager was coming on board, and that we looked forward to engaging in a comprehensive review of town services when the town manager began working in January. Because for years, we've been speaking as a group at Select Board about the need to look at all services and to make sure that we're delivering services in the most effective and the most cost-effective manner possible. And so we're looking forward, going ahead, to reviewing services and making sure whether there are structural changes that we can adopt and that we can look forward to that will save us money as we deliver services. But the budget that's being presented to you this year essentially provides for the same level of service in almost all areas of town government. And what I explained on Monday, and I'll briefly explain today, of the $15.5 million, 65% of that is personnel costs, wages, benefits, incentive pay, health insurance, 65% of our costs are to pay employees. And then about another $3 or $4 million, bringing us up to about 80%, are other big ticket items like insurance and the cost of lights, the cost of solid waste removal, even with the transition to pay as you throw. And then the rest of the budget is those fixed costs and other supporting costs: fuel, electricity, postage, tar, sand, salt. Those are the things that make up the budget. And what are our departments? Police, fire, public works, library, parks and recs, and then the administrative departments: finance, town clerk, planning, and other associated departments. That's the business of town government. And what we're providing to you is essentially a level service budget this year. Now, there are a number of changes in our approach to the budgeting from last year to this year that impact the number that ultimately has to be raised by property taxes. So what are some of those changes? One fundamental change is that we're transitioning to pay-as-you-throw as of July 1st. Pay-as-you-throw was debated at town meeting a number of times. It was approved by town meeting, I think it was, and it was rejected at referendum. It was brought up any number of times. The legislature has determined that we're doing pay-as-you-throw as of July 1. And so we've amended the Code of Ordinances. We've entered into contracts with a company that's going to be selling us the bags and distributing the bags. And we're making arrangements with the haulers in order to transition to the pay-as-you-throw system. And in order for people to throw away trash as of July 1, they're going to have to buy bags. $2 for a medium-sized bag, $3 for a large bag. And we anticipate raising $385,000 from the sale of those bags. It's going to be from everybody in town. We're pulling all of the solid waste costs out of the general fund budget, and we're putting them into an enterprise fund budget, a different budget that's like our utilities budget. Water and sewer isn't part of this budget. You know, we approve that separately. Parking isn't part of this budget. We approve it separately. Trash is now going to be, solid waste is now going to be a separate budget. And so you see at the end of the budget in the town report, $555,000 going out to support solid waste collection and disposal. And we've got $385,000 that we anticipate in cash coming in to, from the sale and purchase of bags. There are other changes in the budget from 2014 to 2015 that we can identify for you. For example, last year, we spent over $500,000 in money from the savings account to lower taxes. A chunk of it, $310,000, was money we set aside 2 years ago to fix the skating rink. But then we found a cheaper way to fix the skating rink. And so we took the $310K that we saved off the skating rink that was coming from the savings account, and we reduced our taxes. We also took $200,000 more in cash last year out of the savings account, and we reduced our tax rate last year by that amount. There are other changes in the way in which we're accounting for things and the way in which money's being raised. For example, we've got about $200,000 more for salaries in this budget than last year. Collective bargaining agreements are up for renewal this year. We're going to be doing negotiations. There's other committed salary increases that we're looking at. So there's $200,000 more in salaries. Some of the other changes have to do with, well, there are other small changes, but those are primary differences between last year's and this year's budget. Level service with those changes brings us to about $15.5 million total. Now, the budget that was presented in the town report was somewhat more than what's being presented today. I'd like to explain how we got from what's in the town report that was approved at the end of January when we went to the printer to what's being presented today. First, a majority of the board voted in December and then in January to include $140,000 and change in the budget to pay for the additional cost of borrowing more money to continue forward with the police fire project. So if you look under notes and indebtedness in the town report budget, there's about $140,000 of that money was intended for new borrowing on the police fire facility. Bond counsel rendered an opinion about 3 or 4 weeks ago saying that we could not move forward with the police fire project in a form different from what was approved in October 2012 on the money that we were borrowing based upon that October 2012 recommendation, if we were doing the police fire project differently than we originally planned. So since there's been discussion of not building on to the municipal center for police station, but rather moving it up to Putney Road, we can't right now borrow more money for police fire facility work based upon the authorization from October 2012. So we took that $140,000 out of the budget. In addition, we saved about $100,000 by getting a pre-purchase of fuel for next calendar year. We got our fuel locked in for next year at $1.95. We saved about $100,000 at the town level. $40,000 of that is savings in the utility budget, that being water and sewer budget. But about $60,000 comes out of the budget that's being presented today. And we had to make a choice at the select board meeting 3 weeks ago whether we were going to raise that money through taxes anyway, and or whether we were going to pass on to the taxpayers that savings. And since we had real numbers that said we were saving about $60,000 off the operating budget this year, we decided to pass that savings through. With that $200,000 having come out of the budget, there was a little bit of an increase as well in county taxes, but with that big pot of money and savings coming out of the budget, we realized at the time that we were very close to being able to provide a budget that provided no increase in real estate taxes in the coming year. You know, the school budget's a little bit lower, but still their taxes are going to be going up 2.5 cents based upon the state formula. Well, we decided we wanted to have no tax increase if it was really within our grasp. And that's what we decided to do. So we're taking $96,000, or proposing to take $96,000 from the unassigned fund balance to put towards next year's expenses. And with those other reductions, the total spending for the town would be $15.5 million, and there'll be no tax increase if the budget is passed as it's been proposed and as I've moved. I would just quickly also point out there's a difference between the $15,307,899 number that's part of this, my motion on the budget, and the total spending that I've been speaking to, which is $15.5 million. That difference arises because of other expenses that we've already approved at today's meeting. So that includes select board salaries, the downtown improvement district money, the money for Brattleboro climate protection, and the human services funding expenditures. When you add up those additional expenditures, select board salaries, the DID money, climate protection, and human services, and add that to the $15,307,899, total expenses for the operating budget this coming year are the $15.5 million figure that I've been speaking to.
Is there debate on the budget as proposed by Mr. Gartenstein? The chair would recognize Mr. Scholes.
I just wanted to point out with the waste management and the pay-as-you-throw, on page 67, you see that we just emptied out that whole that whole area for trash collection. And then a couple pages later, you'll see in the bottom of 71, we transferred 550,000 back in. So we're actually spending that line now. What we're spending on trash is $450,000 less than we did last year as a town. You all and we all are going to be buying these trash bags. If we buy them for less than the $380,000, if we use fewer of them, that reduces even more of the savings. But right now, even if we bought $380,000 worth of bags, with this deduction, we're still going to be spending significantly less because of pay-as-you-throw. I just wanted to point that out, and it's up to you how much less we spend depending on how much you throw away as opposed to recycling or composting. Thanks.
The question is on the budget, is moved by Mr. Gartenstein. Is there any debate? Ms. Melton.
Paula Melton, District 1. I just want to ask what the tax effect would be if we did not take the $96,265 from the general fund.
We'd have a tax increase of about 2/3 of a penny.
Further discussion? Yes, ma'am.
Georgia Morgan, District 2. I'm looking at the capital improvement plan, and I just have a couple of questions about some numbers in the Department of Public Works part. For fiscal, it's page 74 at the top of the page. For fiscal 2015 and 2016, I see that there is absolutely no money designated for sidewalk repair and replacement. And then maybe in 2017, there's a big number, and there's big numbers after that. Can we believe that the sidewalks will actually be repaired in 2017?
A member of the administration or the select board is interrogated.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We have a carryover of sidewalk repair money that was not expended in this year's budget. So we anticipate being able to make sidewalk repairs with money that's already been raised and is in the bank. Also, we've got very significant grant funding coming from the state of Vermont to entirely rebuild the sidewalks on the east side of Main Street from the bridge at Lower Main Street all the way to Walnut Street. So there's probably going to be some disruption this coming year, and we're going to be doing our best as part of the funding to minimize that disruption, as the entire sidewalk on the east side of Main Street is torn up. There's going to be underground structure work done at the same time. I seem to recall that there may be, benches and some different lights replacement going on as well. So the entire east side sidewalk on Main Street's being replaced probably this summer, and that's almost ready to start. And then there's some other sidewalk money as well, so we didn't have to include any more money this year in the capital budget.
Further questions or debate? Mr. Fallion.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Peter Fallion, District 3. Since we're on the subject of sidewalks, I'm wondering if, what will be the, what's the material going to be used? Are we going to get sidewalks that are permeable to rainwater? It was brought up here, I forget what one of our members brought up several years ago and first came up. And, there is a difference between building a sidewalk that allows water to come through, and thus we save that water, versus water that runs off into the street, into the sewers, and we've lost it. So, is there any discussion on that?
Barrett's interrogated.
Yes, perhaps Steve could answer that
Mr. Barrett,
question.
If he's inclined to respond, may do so.
I'm inclined to respond.
Oh, good.
Steve Barrett, Director of Public Works. The sidewalks are going to be replaced again with concrete sidewalk, but there is a feature on the edge of the sidewalk with brick. Not only aesthetically that'll look nice, but it also allows for some runoff of water. It also allows for future conduits and other things that might be put in at a later date.
Further debate on the budget. Mr. Wolmernick.
Thank you. John Wilmering, 2nd District. Last year, of course, we approved a budget in this body, which was subsequently rejected by referendum. And the Select Board then proposed another budget, which eliminated the interest rate on the second bond planned for the police fire district. That second budget passed, and thereby the failure of the first budget was taken, I think, after the fact as a public indication of disfavor of the police fire project, which I disagreed with. I did not think it should be so taken. This year, we've had recently an opinion by the State Bond Council that a plan to relocate part of the police fire project, mainly the police station, away from the municipal center would be too significant a change and therefore would have to be resubmitted for a vote. Based upon that opinion, we are being told that once again, by omitting interest rates on a second bond, that the town is not ready to proceed on the police fire and renovations. There seems to me to be a second choice, and the second choice is to build the project as originally planned. And I'm asking, I think in a disinterested way, because I think it just begs clarification, if a decision has been taken not to modify and renovate the municipal center for the purposes of this project, and if so, when was that and why?
Mr. Gartenstein.
A final decision has not been made on disposition of that police fire renovation project. It's a big ticket item that remains open on Select Board's plate to be dealt with going forward. And I think it's probably beyond the scope of the meeting, except to say we need to deal with it going forward.
But another question to me seems to be begged, and that is that by my interpretation, this body, representative town meeting, is the policy determining body for the town government. So has the select board now begun to set policy in regard to this major big ticket item?
The budget was rejected. The new budget that was approved didn't have authority for new borrowing in it relating to the police fire project. The police fire facilities, they need to be fixed. But exactly how we're going to do that has not yet been determined. And I believe that we're going to wind up coming back to town meeting once we figure out what proposal to make. But we've not yet reached a decision about that.
Further discussion on the motion? Yes, Bob Abraham.
Yeah, Bob Everingham, District 1. So there's a change in the bond interest this year of $126,000. Is that roughly what we're paying on the $5 million bond that we took out?
A member of the administration is interrogated.
The bond interest is going down by $140,000 after the adjustment that David talked about. So we've taken that out of the budget. It was in the original budget that you were looking at, but we've removed that.
Further debate on the issue of the budget? Mr. Montgomery.
Dad Montgomery, District 2. Monday evening at the information session, Orion Barber stood up and expressed some consternation with the ability to read this budget. And I'd like to second that sentiment. I love getting the annual report every year, and I read through the different department reports, and I get to the budget, and it turns into ancient Greek. And I just don't have the training to understand how to read a budget like this. And I'd like to ask that in future years, there be some informational session given just on how to read that budget.
Further debate or comments? Mr. Herzog.
George Herzog, District 1. I have some problem when politicians claim that they want to level fund some budget. Not that the idea is not appealing, but we know that prices rise, and I hope that the budget is built from the ground up. And we are pretty close to a level funded budget. What I don't agree with is to take money from the reserve fund to just make it look like we are even. We are not quite even. We spend the same amount of money, but we makes us feel good. The problem is that next year, we know that the budget is going to be increased by $96,000 automatically because we won't have the same money to take from the reserve fund again. We also heard this morning that the need of the town is big in future projects, and I would like to use this money to keep for, or even spend it, against this need the town has, rather than to have a nice budget that makes us feel good, but really, we're kind of fooling ourselves.
The question is, shall the Select Board be authorized to raise, appropriate, and expend the sum not to exceed $15,307,899 in order to defray to the extent all general fund expenses for the period of July 1, 2015 through June 30th, 2016, including all highway and Windham County taxes, and that the Select Board be authorized to expend, in addition, any sums authorized for special purposes under any article contained in the warning for this meeting or any special representative town meeting. This motion includes the following funding sources: $96,265 to be appropriated from the unassigned general fund balance, $13,473,675 to be collected in property taxes, and the balance to be comprised of all other sources of revenue collected by the town. This motion also provides that the town taxes assessed on the grand list as of April 1, 2015 shall be due and payable in 4 equal installments, payable to the town treasurer until overdue, then to the collector of taxes, that such payment of the installments shall be made on or before 5 p.m. on August 17th, 2015, November 16th, 2015, February 16th, 2016, and May 16th, 2016. And that interest at a rate of 1% per month be charged from the due date of payment on any overdue payment of the town tax, installment, or portion thereof, and that a penalty of 8% be charged on any overdue payment that remains due and owing on May 17th, 2016. Are you ready for that vote? Dr. Slowinski.
I agree. Walter Slowinski, District 1. I'm in agreement with the sentiment expressed by George Herzog, and would like to offer an amendment to this, that the budget actually be increased by that $96,000 plus $253, whatever, and that the money not be taken out of the general fund.
It has been moved and seconded, and Dr. just to clarify this, it's the 96,265 number you're referring to, is that correct? And is there a second to that motion to amend the budget accordingly? Okay? All right, then it has been moved and seconded to amend the budget by increasing it by the sum of the unassigned fund balance that was to be used, namely $96,265. Is there any debate on that issue? Marshall?
Are we really increasing the budget, or are we decreasing?
Excuse me, you're right.
We're increasing the amount to be collected as taxes. We're not changing the budget space.
You're right, that's correct. You were correct. Thank you for the clarification.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
Procedurally, to reach that result, we would have to strike the language in the 2, 4, 6, 8, 9th line.
Right.
So it would say this motion includes the following funding sources. We would strike 96,265 to be appropriated from the unassigned fund balance.
Right.
And then we'd be increasing the 13,473,675 by 96,265. So that number would become, no, it's this one would just be increased to third. So that motion or that request is to amend the budget article by striking 96,265 to be appropriated from the unassigned general fund balance, and then increasing the next number to 13,569,940.
Thank you, Mr. Gartenstein. Is that correctly state, Dr. Slawinski, your motion? So the motion is, once again, that we will strike the $96,265 from the unassigned general fund balance and increase the next number to $13,569,550. Cheapers. All right, wait a minute, let me write it. $13,569,940. Got it, okay. I hope everybody got that the second time. Okay, is there any question on Dr. Slawinski's motion to amend the budget? Has it been seconded? Yes. Mr. Wilmerding.
Thank you. Unlike most of us probably here, I have had a chance to meet with our new town manager and talk with him about such issues as the desirability of maintaining the unassigned fund balance at 10%. And in the presentation on Monday's informational meeting, I think what I heard you say was that the changes made in the budget since it was first drafted and printed would accomplish that. We would conserve a 10% unassigned fund balance over and above our annual expenditures. Is this amendment necessary to actually do that? Because I think you need a clean slate starting out.
The town manager is interrogated if he chooses to be.
Sure. The numbers that were proposed today, as modified recently by the Select Board, would adhere to the policy and preserve 10% in the unassigned fund balance. The amendment would preserve the 10% plus $96,000 in the unassigned fund balance.
Is there further debate on the amendment offered by Dr. Slawinski? If not, Ms. Tarnas.
I'm a little bit confused. Does that change, that will change the 15 million bottom line, wouldn't it? No. Oh, okay. What I was wondering.
What it will do, as I understand it, is This is the motion you're going to be voting on. This is the motion to amend. We will be deleting from the motion the $96,265 to be appropriated from the unassigned general fund, and we will thereby be increasing the sum to be collected in property taxes by the $96,265, so that the new sum will be $13,569,940. Are you ready for that question? I'll recognize Mr. Rounds. He had his hand up first.
So by doing this, by moving this money around like this, in a quick scenario, this is going to increase the taxes to be collected by about 3/4 to 80% of a cent. Is that correct? So we're going to increase the taxes to be collected, not decrease the taxes that are being collected. You're going to increase the taxes that you're going to collect. So I would have to vote no for the amendment.
Further debate on Dr. Slawinski's amendment. Mr. Agave.
It's probably a good idea to return that money to it. It's not critical. I would like to note that maybe 3 years ago, when the Finance Committee recommended the policy of maintaining the reserve, we also recommended a method of deciding of how to deal with excess reserve. And I guess at that point, the Select Board didn't want to be constrained by a policy, but that would have given us clear guidance now about how to deal with excess reserve.
The question is on Dr. Slawinski's motion to amend. Are you ready for that vote? If so, all those in favor of the amendment to reduce... Yes, point of order.
Someone had a comment.
Oh, sorry, Dr. Tortolani, go.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bob Tortolani, District 2. That small amount of money being moved could look awfully bad to our taxpayers. I mean, it's not so much that it's a small amount, just the very fact that they're going to have more taxes. I just don't think it's a good time to raise taxes at all.
The question is on Dr. Slawinski's motion to delete $96,265 in funding from the unassigned general fund balance. Ms. Moulton.
Paula Melton, District 1, one more question. What is the actual dollar amount to, say, a $100,000 house if we increase taxes by 2/3%?
Does a member of the administration have their calculator?
It's $6 or $7 on a $100,000 house.
Again, I'm returning to the amendment, Dr. Slawinski's amendment to reduce the budget by $96,265, not to reduce the budget, but to reduce the funding source by $96,265 coming from the unassigned general fund balance. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor of Dr. Slawinski's motion to amend, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. And you may be seated, and you have defeated Dr. Slawinski's motion to amend. And we return to the underlying main motion for your consideration. Is there further debate? If not, all those in favor of the budget as presented by Mr. Gartenstein, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. You may be seated. and you have approved Article 23. Article 24, to see if the town shall pass a resolution to amend the Brattleboro Town Charter, Addendum A, Act of 1959, number 302, Section 4A, to change the deadline for incumbent town meeting members to submit their notice of intent to have their names placed on the ballot as presented on page 12 of the town report. The chair recognizes Ms. McCumber.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town adopt a resolution to amend the Brattleboro Town Charter, Addendum A, Acts of 1959, number 302, Section 4A, to change the deadline for the incumbent town meeting members to submit their notice of intent to have their name placed on the ballot to the 6th Monday preceding the election, as presented on page 12 of the town report.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded that the town adopt a resolution to amend the Brattleboro Town Charter, Addendum A, Act of 1959, number 302, Section 4A, to change the deadline for incumbent town meeting members to submit their notice of intent to have their names placed on the ballot to the 6th Monday preceding the election as presented on page 12 of the town report. Is there any discussion or debate? You want to speak? Okay. If none, Mr. Schiff, please.
Leo Schiff, District 3. What is the change from?
You can see the change. It's written in detail on page 12, and the change is the old law is stricken out, and the new proposed is the underlined portion on page 12.
Could you give me a summary, please?
No, it's page 12.
Is Ms. Cappy still here?
Yes, she's here, and I'm going to turn it over to her.
There she is. Ms. Cappy is interrogated. Town clerk, I hope she's here.
Hey, Leo. Okay, the change would change the charter from having incumbent town meeting members submit their notice for re-election from the 7th Monday prior to the election to the 6th Monday. And the change is because now the town honors Martin Luther King holiday and we're closed on the 7th Monday. So it's basically a housekeeping issue to make the two deadlines coincide, and they would be on the 6th Monday prior to the March election.
Thank you. Right.
Okay. And because of the way the charter is also written, it talks about change in the charter can be initiated by a resolution of this body. So what this body would be doing today is approving a resolution to make this change, but the change would not be effective until we had another representative town meeting, and that could be a special meeting. And this resolution, should you vote for it today, would be adopted at the next representative town meeting.
Are there further questions with regard to Article 24? Hearing none, all those in favor, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. And you have approved Article 24. Article 25, to see if the town shall pass a resolution to amend the Brattleboro Town Charter, Article 2, Section 3, to allow mechanical tabulation of ballots from citizens that use early voting as presented. Chair calls on Ms. O'Connor.
Thank you. I move that the town adopt a resolution to amend the Brattleboro Town Charter, Article 2, Section 3, to allow mechanical tabulation of ballots from citizens that use early voting as presented on page 12 of the town report.
Is there a second? And there is. You have then moved and seconded that the town adopt a resolution to amend the Brattleboro Town Charter, Article 2, Section 3, to allow mechanical tabulation of ballots for citizens that use early voting as presented on page 12 of the town report. The chair would once again call on the town clerk.
Thank you. As most of you probably heard on Monday evening, this change would effectively change only early voters who choose to vote in the office prior to an election. Right now, you can vote early for a local election up to 20 days previous to the election, and for a federal election up to 45 days. That doesn't change. That's set by state and federal law. But what this would do would change anybody who chooses to vote early in our office. Instead of coming in, filling out your ballot, sealing it in the required envelope, and filling out the certification on the front, you'd come in, fill out your request, the certification would be built into the request, and you would slide your ballot right into the tabulator. So there would be no envelopes for early voters in the office. We have had many voters tell us that they would like to vote early, but they are uncomfortable by voting in their envelopes. They feel that on election day, when elected officials open those envelopes and then proceed to put them in the machines, that there is the possibility that an election worker can see their vote. And it's true, it can happen. The election officials know that that's not the way it's supposed to be done, and I think we try hard not to see what the votes are. But if it makes people more comfortable to be able to put their ballots in the tabulator when they vote themselves, then I think it's a good thing. I think it will increase voter participation. I think it makes it easier for an early voter, and I think it streamlines the process that we use and the process for the voter. I think maybe there are those who have concerns about the security of the ballots. As it is now, all the early ballots are stored in their envelopes, which are not open till Election Day, in our town clerk's vault. These would be stored in the voting bin. The bins, if you recall what you see when you go to vote on Election Day, you have the tabulator that sits on top of a bin that is similar to this podium, and the tabulator has a numbered seal on it, and the bin would also have a numbered seal. And they would be verified every morning to be sure that the seal has not been broken. So all of the ballots that go through the machine prior to an election are not tabulated. They don't become counted until that night. They're commingled with other election ballots, and they're voted the night of the election. There is no way to know how anyone has voted prior to 7 o'clock on election night.
The question is on Article 25. Are you ready for that vote? Mr. Franks.
Tom Franks, District 3. It may be a moot point, but it says a record of those voting in person shall be maintained. Prior to opening the polls on Election Day, the number of early voters who voted in person shall match the number of voted ballots displayed on the tabulator. What if it doesn't?
I was asked this the other night, and I'm afraid I may have sounded flip. I said, they will balance. And I will repeat, they will balance. But the reason that I may have sounded flip was because we do this now, and we have never, in 26 years, not balanced. I think that the question took me by surprise, because we have always balanced, and we work hard. It's like working in a bank. If you don't balance your drawer, I suppose, at the end of the evening, you work until it's balanced, and that's what we do. So I hope that answers your question, and it's a good question, and I'm sincere with my answer.
Ms. Baboulis.
Dora Buboulis, District 3. The issue of the seal addresses one part of the issue of security, but it doesn't necessarily address the issue of hacking, which has been something that's been really discussed about these machines, and I just wonder if you could address that.
The security of the machine itself, is that what you asked, Dora?
So the physical security of the in-person machine.
Mm-hmm.
you have the seal, and that's how you address not having the machine have issues of fraud that way. But there have been issues brought up over the past couple of years about hacking, and I'm wondering if you could address that.
I don't think that would be any more of an issue than it would be now using the machine on election day. The machine wouldn't be out of our sight. If the machine is tampered with, if you try to take a tally, it locks the machine and no more ballots can go through it. So I think, I don't see any increased chance of tampering. I think when we talk about tampering with voting machines, we're talking more about the actual voting machines. Theoretically, this is not a voting machine, it's just a ballot tabulator. We test the ballots ahead of time, not every one, but we take a random sampling for each district. We use some of the early ballots because they have the folds in them to make sure that those aren't affecting the outcome of a vote. We take some of the regular ballots that don't have the folds in them. We do our testing, and then we manually test our own tallies. So every election that we do, we are confident that the machines are working properly. And once we put that memory card in and do the testing, then there's a special way of setting it for the election, and there's no way that it can be changed after that until 7 o'clock that night when you run you have what they call an ender card, and that is the only thing that you can make the tally start to produce. There's no other way than running that ender card. I hope that answered your question.
Further debate on Article 25. The question is, shall the town adopt a resolution to amend the Brattleboro Town Charter, Article 2, Section 3, to allow mechanical tabulation of votes from citizens that use early voting as presented on page 12 of the town report? Are you ready for that vote? If so, all those in favor, please rise. You may be seated. All opposed, please rise. And you have adopted Article 25. Article 26, to see if the town will vote to establish a committee of representative town meeting to be known as the Committee of the Future. The chair recognizes Mr. Scholes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town establish a committee of representative town meeting to be known as the Committee of the Future, and I'd like to speak to the motion, please.
You may.
I'd like to,
first of all, is there a second? Okay, you may now.
This seemed like a pretty clear-cut issue until we started looking into it, and what I'd like to do is yield my time to our planning director, Rod Francis, to talk about some of the conflicts that may exist if we do this.
Mr. Francis is interrogated.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So when this matter came before the Select Board, I prepared a memo in January discussing the potential for conflict and duplication between the, in outline form, what the role potentially would be of the Committee of the Future versus the Planning Commission, which has its role established under statute. And the Planning Department provides staff support for. So without wanting to go into too much detail, there is a system established through statute for communities to plan across a range of social, economic, and land use areas through the mechanism of the Planning Commission. The single most important product there is the production of a town plan.
Just a moment, point of order. Mr. Dimes.
Isn't it more proper to present the proposition before the opposition?
The proposition is it was moved by Mr. Scholes. He wanted the town manager, the town planner to speak to the issue, so I think it's perfectly okay that he can speak to it. If it's in the negative, so be it. I'm sure there's people that will speak in the positive for it as well. Go ahead, Mr. Francis.
I should say that what I'm doing here is providing information to allow the body to come to a reasonable conclusion.
Okay?
So, on that point, the town plan is the single most significant product of the work of the Planning Commission and has a extensive process of public participation and public review. It's adopted through a series of public hearings by the Select Board and stands as a set of policies and guidelines for the development of the future development of the town over a period of 5 years. It's based on wide-ranging studies and a collection of data and information that can support the policies and goals and action steps that are contained therein. As far as I understand from talking to Mr. Agave recently and looking at the general outline of his concept for a commission of the future, it goes much broader than questions of land development and economic development and community development and deals with issues including the democratic process at the local level and the level of participation of the community in its own future. And so I think it's important to clarify and explain that my concern on behalf of the town and its resources and the Planning Commission and its role is that we have a clearly defined role, and if the Commission of the Future is to proceed, the scope and range of activities that the Commission of the Future should engage in should not in any way overlap or compromise the role that is already established under statute for the Planning Commission and the work of town staff to support that. However, there may be issues and concerns that Mr. Agave feels that the Commission of the Future could address that I think are more than reasonable for this body to support, and I would be happy to see that outcome. But I want to be very clear what the challenges are in terms of the already defined role of the Planning Commission. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions.
Further discussion or debate concerning the motion currently on the floor with regard to Article 26? Mr. Agave.
I was lost in thought. I almost didn't raise my hand. I think we're all aware that the future is very uncertain, that we have enormous problems ahead of us. We have the lowest household income in the state, and we don't have an economy that's moving. In fact, we got yet another trade agreement underway, which is going to harm the economy even more. We have a climate issue. Some people think it's the most important issue that there could possibly be. And it's possible that in 20 years we won't have fossil fuels, or we won't be able to burn the fossil fuels we have. What do we do right now to address that? How do we even begin to talk about that now? And there's a lot of issues that need a place to be talked about. We have problems everywhere. This started essentially as I started looking at the future and discovering, becoming aware of all the uncertainties. One of the things that I felt is that if we were going to be able to respond, to prepare, to understand, we were going to have to examine the future in as much detail with all the knowledge we have and make our best guess about where we're going. And then we're going to have to find ways to respond to it. And then I began to realize, to think about why has this not happened? And that led to something else, and it happened, and it became clear one day when I happened to pick up a book called Bowling Alone, which has now become a seminal work in economic social life in the U.S. And what this author did was examine the thousands upon thousands of ways over a long period of time in the latter half of the 20th century in which our communities, which the fabric of our communities began to slowly come apart in myriads of ways, small ways, but adding up. It was the result of which was a level of participation critical to maintaining a democracy and to be able to function as a strong community, because I realized that only by being able to function as a very strong, unified community can we hope to come out as well as we can possibly come out in the future. But when I looked at the things that this writer was examining all over the U.S., I found the very same things here. When I looked around, I found that only 15% of our voters went out to vote. That of those, our leadership was elected by 10%. If you actually looked at the percent of adults in this community that voted for the select board, it's about 7 or 8%. Do we still have a government to which we consent? We have, how do we rebuild? We couldn't find candidates to run for the select board, again, other than the incumbents. We've been having tremendous difficulty, more than we have ever had, in finding townspeople to become members of this body. We're having huge difficulty trying to fill the committees and the boards on town. Remarkably enough, and it was almost the exclamation point, we couldn't find a Boy Scout to carry the flag at our own meeting. And this is not just an isolated, when you look across the board at involvement in all kinds, not just the civic boards, but private boards, committees, activities, houses of worship, everywhere you look, community participation is declining, and the fabric of our society is weakening. And that has to be rebuilt. And I think part of the major work of a committee of the future is to examine it. Look at the facts, look at the records, see what's real and what isn't. We all seem to remember how things were, but you really have to go back and examine it. And then to be able to understand our community and figure out how to rebuild it. We have to deal with poverty. That's going to be critical. We now have a town in which almost 50% of the income, of personal income, is unearned. It's transfer payments from welfare, Section 8s and all of that stuff, Social Security, and then, of course, rents, interest, dividends, etc. But what it tells you is that the town is not working. Right now, if any of that dried up, if all of it, we're in real trouble. We don't have, there was a time this community supported itself a long time ago. It built its own roads, it built its own schools, it built its own houses, it raised its food. We have reached a point where a wire breaks and we're practically incapacitated. These are all huge issues. We have, why are so few people not interested in participating in civic life in our government? There are reasons for that. It did not materialize out of thin air. It's the result of choices that we have been making for a long time, not realizing what the consequences of those choices would be. And that's the work, that would be the work of this. Those are not questions that have ever been addressed in a town plan. They are not part of the state's mandate of what is supposed to go into a town plan. As our town planning director said, the town plan is supposed to support policies. But how do we determine our policies? Are our policies good? Are they beneficial? What's the history of them? Where are they leading us? Where have they led us? There are so many. I've spoken to scores upon scores of people, and everyone I've spoken to has come up with yet new ideas. How do we communicate with each other in this town? Used to be, half the town anyway, was reading the newspaper. But if you want to communicate with the town now, how do you do it? Is it the Reformer, the Commons, BCTV, radio, Brattleboro, the internet, what, Facebook, Craigslist? I don't know. If a community cannot communicate with each other, what are the chances it's going to be able to solve its problems, to pull together? I don't have the answer for this, but I know it has to be examined. And I feel like with all the years that I have in virtually every aspect of our local government, and all the studying I've done, the experience I have, all that I've read, I'm a good person to take this task on, even though I don't have experience in doing anything like this. There aren't many models out there to follow. But if we are going to pull together as a community, we need to be able to face ourselves, to ask hard questions, and to find answers and solutions, etc. And that is the work that I hope we can achieve.
Further debate, Mr. Harvey.
George Harvey, District 3. I have already volunteered to be on this committee. I want to explain where I'm coming from. It's a little bit different presentation than Spoon's, but I think it might clarify things, at least from what my point of view is. Every day, I try to be up by 4. I spend the first 4 hours of the day working, looking in the news. I do research. I take the articles that I find in searches on renewable energy, nuclear power, climate change, global warming, and that sort of thing, assemble the ones that I like into a list of 10 to 15. Each has a synopsis of about 50 to 55 words. Each has a link to the original article, and I post them on a blog. Today I put my 1,023rd blog posting up, and I've got something over 11,000 links in it. I look at these articles, and quite frankly, some of them are very, very frightening. The World Wildlife Fund says that we could lose 30 to 70% of all multicellular animal species if we don't get climate change under control. The United States military says that climate change is our #1 security issue for the 21st century. We are running out of fossil fuels. There's no question about this. The Monterey Play in California, which was said to have enough natural gas to provide us, the entire nation for decades turned out to have about 5%, 6% of what was originally estimated. There's only one natural gas field in the United States that is actually making really good money. The rest of them are all failing, or at best breaking even. We've got a lot of problems. And you know what? I put that stuff up every day, and people come to me and they say, George, are you purposely searching the news for optimistic material? And I say, no, I'm just putting up what I find. And the reason they ask is because so much of what I put up is optimistic. There is so much happening that's going on. We've got economists and bankers who are working on these problems. We've got technicians who are working on these problems, and the things that they're producing are just amazing. There's a nonprofit in Boston called Ceres. They started years ago when the Exxon Valdez disaster happened, and they said, we've got to start getting capitalism going so that we don't have these disasters, and since we're capitalists, let's start doing it. So they sent a letter to Barack Obama about a year ago saying, we got to do something about climate change. And that letter was signed by an organization they had put together that represented investments totaling $16 trillion. That organization has now grown to over $21 trillion. And they are demanding worldwide that we stop funding fossil fuels with the subsidies we're giving them of $500 to $600 billion a year worldwide. Now, the point of what I'm getting at here is amazing things are happening. I want to give you an example or two. One of them, E.ON, which is the largest investor-controlled utility in the world, has decided to spinning off that portion of their business, which is a traditional utility business, that they think is going to be the one that really doesn't have much chance of getting a profit in the near future. And what they spun off was nuclear and fossil fuels. They're going in for renewables. We've got another organization, Barclays Bank, which is in the UK, which has warned its investors that they are degrading all bonds of all US utilities because they saw a year and a half ago that within 3 years it would be cheaper for most Americans to put solar power on their roof and batteries in their basements than to buy power from the grid. And I have to tell you, Green Mountain Power is doing some amazing things. But what this comes down to is this. We need in this town somebody who's got two flags, a red one and a green one, who can run that red flag up and say, wait, we've got a problem here. Or who can run the green flag up and say, hey guys, look at this, here's an opportunity. And it's going to be something that they've discovered just then. It's going to be something that has been discovered because somebody, me or some other person in the committee, has been doing some research and has discovered something that nobody knew until that morning. And when that happens, the opportunity is there and we can start planning on it. And we don't want to take something away from the planning board. What we want to do is just provide information so that people who are out there who currently make decisions can make better informed decisions. And that, maybe, Spoon, am I right? Is that what we're about?
Well, we can't get into a debate here in the middle, and may I say this, Mr. Harvey? Your comments are very important, and this is very vital.
I understand. I've run too long.
We have to keep within the 2 or 3 minute limit. Thank you. Ms. Davison.
I appreciate the passion of both Spoon and George in speaking to this issue. I'll be very brief. I'm definitely in favor of this committee, and I volunteered to serve on it too. And I think that we can work in such a way that we can add to any work that the Planning Commission does around some of these issues and not at all intrude in their space.
Yes.
Elizabeth McLaughlin, District 3. I'm also chair of the Planning Commission, and while I see that this committee that is proposed would not want to duplicate the efforts of the Planning Commission, I also think that there are a finite set of volunteers, and that just as Spoon was saying that we need to revitalize our civic life, I think we also need to be protective of how many people are called upon to volunteer for various things. And it sounds to me like in revitalizing our civic life, we should be revitalizing the elements that are already in place. For example, we have, of course, the Select Board, and we have, economic development committees in the town and countywide, and we have a 5-year capital plan that's starting, and we have a finance committee, and we have a planning commission, and an energy commission, and a conservation commission, and it would seem to me that this revitalization can best be used by revitalizing all of those things rather than creating yet another committee that's going to tap into other volunteers that could be used to revitalize the elements that we already have in place. And I think that's really the best way to revitalize our civic life.
Mr. Phillips.
Steve Phillips, District 3. I respect Mr. Harvey and Mr. Agave for their determination, and I suspect that regardless of whether a committee is formed, their work will continue, and we will continue to hear about it. And when we met last June, I think I was the only member of this body who stood up and said, I don't get it. What are we doing here? So I voted against forming the ad hoc committee. And that ad hoc committee was charged with proposing bylaws and a statement of goals, rather. I don't think we've gotten any farther than we were during that discussion. I think it would be appropriate to send the committee, the ad hoc committee, back to work to do what they were charged to do in the first place. Forming a committee without a defined goal doesn't make sense to me. I have to say, I just don't understand what it's going to do, even based on these lengthy presentations. I can sort of maybe divine some of the topics they would discuss, but not how they would operate, or really what our charge to them would be. So without more, I'm not in favor of forming a committee to go charging off into the darkness. Thank you.
Further discussion. Mr. Chapman.
Thanks, Mr. Moderator. Chris Chapman, District 1. I'm hearing an echo from the distant past in our nation's history as I listen to this debate. I think the first blog in America was Poor Richard's Almanac. Seriously, it was very important, and it was an ingenious publication, widely circulated and with quality that has withstood the test of time, centuries in fact. And what Mr. Harvey in particular is talking about, I think is really important, really important. I don't think that it is appropriate for this body to create a committee to publicize a blog. I do think that it would be really helpful to ask our librarian to help him and anyone else with the opinions that have been so passionately and thoroughly assembled to make it possible for us in Brattleboro to have access to the work that they've done on finding information and analyzing it so that we can, in so doing, eliminate this problem that Mr. Phillips has just very articulately expounded on, and yet not sacrifice our access to some really important information. What Mr. Harvey just said was amazing. I'm always amazed to hear original thought. I'm always amazed to hear new things. I think one of the reasons we have media that we have in such profusion, with such great market value put on it in many different ways, is that it is so important and interesting. But I agree with Mr. Phillips, not a committee of the town. Yes, use the library, which is a unique institution in the town, and in so passing it off as you will, but in a favorable way, in a positively put way, to the library to facilitate the the transmission of that analysis, I think would be quite valuable and a real public service and in an appropriate manner.
Further debate? Yes, the gentleman here.
Bob Beatty, District 1. I'm not sure what this committee is going to do. I'm not sure how valuable it's going to be. But it might be valuable, and it might do some good stuff. And it's not costing us any money at this point. And I don't agree with the opinion that volunteerism is a finite resource. Volunteerism is something that comes out of inspiration. And there are at least 2 or more people that are inspired. So let's see what they'll do. It might be of some value. It might be not of any value, but why sit on something because it, and not let it happen? I don't understand the purpose of it. Right now, it's not costing us any money, and God knows we need some help.
Mr. Webster.
I, too, when Mr. Harvey gets up, I listen. I think most of us do. Appreciate the impassioned speech. My concern is governance. And that's what I spent most of my life doing, whether it's in schools or in state government or other kinds of things. And usually in the case of governments, when something is set up, it has a purpose that's directly related to the responsibilities of the people who are making those decisions, the accountability, the responsibility to authorities to do things, make things happen or not. And when I see a committee like this, I've served on a couple of them, and they're a lot of fun, and sometimes they're useful. They've always been in the private sector as an independent, non-government organization that has influence because of the power of its ideas. And I don't see our selectmen or the Planning Commission particularly, or the selectmen particularly, is this committee going to speak for anybody? Are they speaking for the Planning Commission, if that's the division it's sort of under, or is it speaking for the Board of Selectmen? Whatever it is, they're select people, excuse me. Yes. And so my question is, and in the theory of having governance, you need to have some accountability to somebody that's responsible to the public. And the kind of free flow of ideas and expressions that I envision taking place like this is not necessarily going to take place in that venue. So even though I love the idea of people talking together, and I encourage them to do it in a private sector situation since there's no money involved, why does it have to be an official act part of town government? It can be an important part of this institution of the town of Brattleboro, but I don't see its relationship to how we govern ourselves. So we're setting up, I think, expectations that can't be met, and how often has government done that? So I'd suggest that I can't support this. I'd encourage them on to form some kind of organization to do their work.
Further debate. Mr. Mima.
Yes, Ralph Mima, District 3. I would just like to add to this conversation by referring to a couple of previous experiments along these lines that might give us a little bit of guidance or material in figuring out whether to support this or not, or to support it with some sort of an amendment. Rod Francis will remember maybe the specifics, but around 5 or 6 years ago, because this sort of general topic had come up once before at least, there was a meeting organized, I think, to inform the planning process that brought in people from lots of different departments to talk about sustainability. And it was at the Marlborough College Graduate Center in maybe 2009, 2010, something like that. I don't think there was any follow-up. But here's the thing. The value, I think, was just in the conversation that happened at that time. A lot of people said some very interesting things. And some kind of regular follow-up, I think, would have been helpful. And maybe it happened within the Planning Commission or within the planning process. But I think the value was in simply being part of a conversation at a particular moment in time, getting a lot of interesting statistics, information about the status quo, and just the creative thinking it stimulated. The other thing is that 2 years ago, I believe it was, George Harvey also suggested that there be a study carried out on behalf of the town. It was one of these final resolutions during the town meeting that that Brattleboro study how other communities were handling, basically climate adaptation, energy efficiency, and renewable energy. And so what it resulted in was a subcommittee under the Energy Committee that was dubbed Project Atlantic, and it was very difficult to, with a very broad mandate, no real follow-up or accountability required, and no resources other than people's volunteer time. It was very difficult to produce anything concrete out of that exercise, except for one thing, and that was that we managed to establish a partnership with some science teachers at BOHS that then informed a number of student projects that all had to do with different areas of energy. Again, there was value in the conversation, in the actual doing, and in multiple conversations over time. But I think we should be very careful about forming a committee, and we should ask ourselves whether a committee operating in relative isolation, without a clear mandate, and certainly without like a follow-up process, and also without resources, can be the most effective way of addressing the issues that I think Spoon Agave brought up so forcefully a few minutes ago. And that's why, again, procedurally, I'm not sure exactly how to do this, but I would like to propose that rather than this being called and functioning as a committee on the future, that the motion be amended to read a regular conference on the future, so that there be no duplication of the efforts of so many other bodies, but that a vital conversation occur on a regular basis that creates a vessel for the sorts of things we heard just a little while ago from both George Harvey and Spoon and others.
So, Mr. Maima, am I correct that you are offering an amendment so that the way that it would read is to establish not a committee, but to establish a conference?
Or can I
yes.
withdraw conference and just call it conversation? And that it be a town-sanctioned conversation on the future.
To establish a conversation, we got to change this. To establish a committee of representative town meeting to be known as the Committee of the Future. I'm not sure quite how you want to reword it, or how you could reword it. To establish
Well, I would simply I'd pull out committee.
Yes.
And call it regular conference. I'll go back to conference on the future. And just by way of explanation, I think there's tremendous value in all of us, or many of us, being gathered and listening to statistics and examples and so forth from knowledgeable people, and it being done in a way that the whole town knows about, so that it's accessible and it's got an impact.
So now, let me make sure I understand what your motion is. You move to amend the motion to read to establish a regular conference on the future.
Yes.
Is that correct? Is there a second? Okay, it's been moved and seconded that the article, the main motion, be amended to read to establish a regular conference on the future. Is there any point of order, Mr. Wilmerding?
I'd just like to know, since last meeting, we gave these people a charge.
Please, you want to use the microphone?
Town attorney wants to talk. Since last meeting, we gave these people on this ad hoc exploratory committee a charge to bring back a recommendation to us. I would like to know if they consider this a friendly amendment.
Okay. Well, as far as friendly amendments are concerned, I think this is, first of all, something that we'd have to treat as a regular amendment. But before we do that, I want to hear from the town attorney as to whether the town attorney considers this germane and to the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. And obviously defer to you as the chair of the meeting here. But with regard to the warned article was to establish a committee under Addendum B of the Charter, subsection 3 gives the town meeting the ability to establish special committees. It does not use the word conference or seminars or whatever you wish with regard to that. So as to the overall germaneness, you'll have to rule on that, but I only offer this with respect to what the charter says, and also it's been warned to establish a committee. So the germaneness of it, I leave to you as to whether making it a conference changes it sufficiently from what was warned. Thank you.
Mr. Maima, you may have a good idea, but I do believe that it departs too much from the substance and approach, the method that was warned. And when an amendment is offered that changes the method of execution of an article or changes the subject of an article, it has to be declared as not germane and out of order. I think it's a close call, but I think I'm going to have to rule that it is out of order in the context of the warning and in the context of the town plan. Unless there is objection or an appeal of the chair's ruling, I will rule it out of order. Is there any further discussion? I'm going to go back to Ms. Boubulis has had her hand up.
Thank you, Dora Boubulis, District 3. Just a point of clarification, this body isn't a governmental body. It's a representative body of the citizens, and it's the democratic arm. It's not actually part of the government, it's the oversight of the government. So to say, I mean, so I just wanted to clarify that because we tend to get a little overconfident in this body and think that we are more than what we are. I'm not sure what I think about this idea of a committee and to have something so non-defined. But I also know that there are many citizens who have lots of really good ideas who do not either feel they can access or want to access the formalized structure of what we have right now in town government. We have really serious systemic issues with our government, I feel. And it's not being addressed. The fact of the matter is that I'm not concerned about overlap because the Planning Commission can't deal with all of the things that it needs to deal with because it doesn't have time. Nor does the planning staff have the ability to deal with all of those things because there's not enough people working in the department. So I'm not concerned about overlap. I would hope that any committee, just like the Town Finance Committee, would work in conjunction and cooperation with the town staff and the boards and committees that already exist. I think anything that offers a less formalized structure, and nothing may not come out of it. You know, it could, but what harm does it do, really? And maybe some really, really good ideas about changes that could happen that would make things better. I'm sort of on the fence as to whether or not things can be improved. That's having spent a number of years in town government, and I'll be honest, that's the way I feel. So anything that can bring to life new ideas and thoughts about how to do things in this community, I find welcome.
Mr. Wilberding. No, you need to be recognized. No. Yes, you do, Paul.
At our last meeting, we voted overwhelmingly to commission this group to report back to us. I think that one of two things is not yet present. I don't think there's a readiness to hear quite what they may bring back to us in terms of its promise and its propitiousness for our work in town government. And I think that we should table this motion for further consideration at a subsequent meeting, and I consider that, I would like to speak to that motion to table, but I consider it a friendly motion because we've spent a lot of money.
I'm going to stop you right there, Mr. Wilmerding. We are not in Vermont allowed to do that. Normally, under Robert's rules, tabling a motion is appropriate, and it would be appropriate in a private organization or assembly, but we must act on every warned article. And we must vote it up, vote it down, amend it, but we can't torpedo it by tabling it. So we are required to act on it. Do you agree with that, Mr. Fisher?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I do. It's in Addendum A of the Charter, Section 8, which reads, "No article in the warning shall at any representative town meeting be finally disposed of by a vote to pass over, to lay upon the table, to postpone indefinitely, or to take no action thereon."
Okay, go ahead.
Then let me speak very briefly in favor of this motion. We decide today, as we've decided in many years running, to expend much additional discretionary resources on our education system, in particular for people who learn differently. People who were once described and thought of as disabled, but who today in a more enlightened way are considered differently abled. We have people like that among us as adults working in this community who think differently. They're wired to ask, is this really true? Should we adopt all these assumptions that we're using to make these decisions? These are a precious treasure in our community. People like George Harvey, who gets up at 4 o'clock, does extensive research, publishes it, and asks people to please think about this because he thinks it's imperative. And I think that if we dismiss this initiative, we are dismissing that kind of a treasure in and among us.
Ms. Davison.
Many people have expressed some confusion about what would be the goals, how would this committee be accountable, and the ad hoc committee last year on the Futures Committee actually came up with a piece of paper that I think most people could have gotten, which says the Committee of the Future, and it describes the purpose, and it describes, within this framework, the committee shall, it's a full page describing the goals and describing the accountability. The committee will come back and report to the town meeting at the end. The meetings will be public, open to the public. So there's a pretty clear, although it hasn't been put into effect yet, so who knows how it will actually change, but there is a pretty fair guideline and a sense of accountability both to this body and definitely says working with a current town plan. So it seems to me that the ad hoc committee did a pretty good job of trying to come up with a framework within this committee could function with some governance and with some accountability. So it's not quite as vague as some people seem to be experiencing or thinking, at least from my point of view, which is why I signed up for it.
Ms. Kornheiser.
Emily Kornheiser, District 1. I agree with Spoon that we have a participation crisis in this country and in Brattleboro. I read Bowling Alone. I thought it was a fabulous book. I think in some ways I'm differently brained. I majored in sociology because I'm interested in seeing the problems and finding connections with them. I'm very involved in this town. I serve on a number of boards and committees, and whenever I talk to any one of my friends about the work I do, they say, oh, committee work, that is so frustrating. It doesn't ever go anywhere. And when it is supposed to go somewhere, you know, people get into it, things change, and there's no real path forward for opinions that people have. And I am concerned that if we establish a committee without a true purpose and a true method of accountability built into that committee, that we're going to bring more people into committees who will eventually be frustrated and leave the democratic process. We have a generational shift that's going to need to happen in this community. If you look around this room at the median age of who's sitting here and the age of people who sit on committees, we need to bring some new blood into these committees, and that's not happening because people enter the committees and they're frustrated. I'd also like to speak to that piece of paper that you have there. The wording that's in that piece of paper was not the final product of the committee. It was never officially declared or voted on. Thank you.
Do we have, yes, Mr. Trine? A new voice. Looking for new voices.
Mark Truhan, District 3. I've listened to the discussion on the a group getting together to talk about new ideas for the future, and what I see here is not necessarily a governmental committee. I see a non-governmental organization. It's a perfect opportunity for a group that does not need affiliation with a governmental body to discuss the impact of current events on future conditions. Outcomes from this group can be published, or public seminars can be arranged, and truly unique positive ideas affecting the future can perhaps drive private funding. I do not see any need for a community committee concerning the future beyond the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Mr. Rounds has had his hand up, and I'm going to allow him to make his motion. Paul? No, you had your hand up. If you wish to make the motion, you can, but you have to make it formally when you're recognized. You wish to waive the opportunity? Okay. Dr. Tortolani.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bob Tortolani, District 2. I think this is a very interesting conversation. It's quite one of the more exciting discussions we've had today, even though we're getting a little bit tired. I've heard a couple of people say that this is might be a good idea, but not as part of a governmental situation. I would like to hear from our new town manager or members of the select board to tell how they feel about the feasibility of this being part of the town government.
Is there someone on the Board of Selectmen or the administration who would like the opportunity to respond to this?
I respond purely as an opinion. I think it's a great idea. I'm not sure I see how it fits in to the government structure or how the things that the committee comes up with would come to the select board.
Yes, Mr. Elwell.
First, I'll ask the forgiveness of the body. I hadn't planned to speak at all on this, but since the question's been asked in the manner that it has, I'd like to answer it with some context. So, Mr. Moderator, can I have a couple of minutes?
You can have 2 minutes. And we should give everybody else 2 minutes.
Tell us how you...
It's not a secret that I'm one of you and have come back home. And the conversation we've just had for the last hour is one of the reasons why I did. Brattleboro is special, and I'm not kidding about that. I think that having these kinds of conversations and the passion for looking at things from a different way is one of the things that is really strong about Brattleboro, and why I'm so optimistic when I look to the things I think we can accomplish together going forward. But, and I would never have said this without being asked to participate, because I think it's your conversation, not mine, but since now I've got the floor, I think it's unequivocally clear from my perspective, which granted is a perspective that comes from a life of serving in government, that the work of our local government, particularly now in the challenges that we've been discussing all day,
is much more about the nuts and bolts of what needs to be done to get our house in order and keep it in order going forward. And the value of what Mr. Harvey and Mr. Agave and the others who want to be a part of this process can bring is real and it's powerful. But I agree wholeheartedly with those who say it should be done on their own private time, in their own private way, and brought to the public arena. I think that to devote the resources of our town government to that effort as it has been described today is not our best foot forward in fixing the things that need to be fixed with our boots on the ground.
Thank you. Ms. Melton.
Paula Melton, District 1, and I have a question. I keep hearing people say that there's no money involved. I would like to know if anybody in the town government has quantified the number of hours of the town government's time or officials' time that would be taken by meetings with this group or hours, things like that.
Is anyone in a position to respond to the question asked by Ms. Melton? No? Okay. Further discussion from people who have not had a chance yet to speak. Let's see, Mr. Sage.
I just want to bring up a couple of points on this paper. It was brought up by one that this is what we should be looking at, brought up by another that this is not definitive. So I'm a little confused there as whether we should be looking at it or not. It says in the first sentence that this is comprising the general charge of the committee. And then if you look at the first sentence on the third paragraph, it says it's comprehensive long-term study and planning. And I'd like to know exactly what's entailed in that planning for all areas of civic life. Are they going to be making, how is this going to go forward to the governing body, which I'm still not sure how that governing body for this committee is going to work. My second point is, and it says down below in the bullets, developing initiatives to encourage democratic participation and hold representatives accountable. And am I not correct in that holding representatives accountable as part of the town charter or policies?
Those sound, Mr. Sage, like you're really interrogating Mr. Agave. Do you care to respond to those, Mr. Agave?
Well, I can't, I'm not quite sure. I think what was meant by that, I was actually on vacation when that statement was written, but I think what was meant to it is that it would hold, it would create accountability by bringing questions out into the public and creating the conversation as we spoke about, et cetera. It's at some point, you know, as people hear more information, they will ask questions, which is probably the crux of what's going on here. I think everybody knows that I will ask questions. I think, and I somehow felt in a moment that Mr. Wilmerding could not have put it any more aptly when he said, "We are not ready to hear what they bring back." And that is my question. We, as a committee, the reason I went as a committee of town meeting is so that this committee would have the independence, would not be under any obligations or rules or regulations of town government, because town government would be one of the very things we would be discussing. I felt like being under this body, we would have that independence. And essentially, it all comes down to that. Everything else is kind of technicalities, this, that, and the other thing. Are you ready as a community to look at yourself in all the difficulties, the warts, the problems, the history, and all the things. Are you ready to hear someone say, who are we? This is what we look like. And lastly, it's true. I have considered from the beginning about whether or not this committee should be associated with the town at all. It seemed at first like a good idea because I thought, as the Finance Committee, it would have a little more cooperation from the town. Listening here, I'm not so sure it would. But regardless, the information is there for anybody to find. There's a lot of reasons. I'm also aware, in a lot of ways, it's a great deal easier to work outside the purview of government. There are no quorums necessary. There are no notes necessary. You don't have to warn if 3 or 4 people, as I've heard it said, want to meet someday in the morning over breakfast. They can meet and talk. It's a lot easier in a lot of ways to do this independently. But what I was seeking was a statement or the support of this body, which feels like it represents the town, as to whether it wants to sanction the work that a committee like this would do.
Mr. Rowell.
Steve Rowell, District 2. Can we move the question?
Thanks, Steve.
Mr. Rowell has moved to cease debate, which is not debatable. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor of ceasing debate, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed to ending debate, please rise. You may be seated, and debate is ceased. And we return to the main motion, which is, shall the town establish a committee of representative town meeting to be known as the Committee of the Future? All those in favor, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. The chair is in doubt. We'll have a division. All those in favor of the motion to establish a committee of representative town meeting to be known as the Committee of the Future, please rise. Remain standing until counted.
That's a neat group, interesting group.
You may be seated. All those opposed to establishing a Committee of the Future, please rise and remain standing until your vote is counted.
Pretty solid leadership. That's a great idea. Just
Listen to the results of your vote. Those voting yes, 52. Those voting no, 67. And you have defeated Article 26. Article 27, Actually, we have just now completed the main body of the work here today. I thank you very much. Now we move to Article 27, to transact any other business that may lawfully come before the meeting. If anyone has any motions that they wish to make or resolutions, please bring them up to me. I would also remind you that there are a variety of surveys. We've got Mr. Bruneau's survey and other surveys to please fill out before you leave. With that, I will entertain any questions for other business. I have a resolution here that is being offered by Mr. Scholes.
I would like the town meeting reps to consider the following resolution. Resolved that the members of the Brattleboro Representative Town Meeting do not support efforts by the Vermont State Legislature to empower the State Board of Education to determine the existence of the Brattleboro Town School District. And I'd like to speak to the motion.
Is there a second to that resolution? It's been seconded. The resolution is that members of the Brattleboro Representative Town Meeting do not support efforts by the Vermont State Legislature to empower the State Board of Education to determine the existence of the Brattleboro Town School District. The chair recognizes Mr. Scholes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I want to just draw you back to this morning and to the school meeting and the quality of the conversation and the depth of information and understanding of what happens in our schools, that the communication that took place there. And then point out that the legislature right now in the House, there is a bill, H361, which is likely to come to a vote this week or next week, and if approved as well by the Senate, would eliminate the Brattleboro Town School District. And it would eliminate all the other town school districts in the state, so that our schools, our elementary schools, the Vernon, Putney, Dummerston, and Guilford schools, and probably the Marlboro schools would be forced into a larger district, including the high school, the middle school, and the career center. And that's what would happen unless we chose to go through a currently undefined process that will be established by the Agency of Education and the State Board of Education to and put in substantial time, energy, and resources to convince the State Board that we're really kind of doing okay, that we're not inefficient, that we're not quaint, that we're not meaningless, and that you're not really going to save any money by eliminating that level of conversation, by eliminating elected local officials who are responsible for oversight of the schools, and by eliminating your voice in voting on that school budget. We would no longer vote on the elementary school budget. We would vote on one large consolidated budget for all the schools in whatever this region, the regional district turned out to be, and that vote would be Australian ballot. So I think that's a terrible idea. I think it goes against the basic democratic principle of keeping democracy and keeping decision-making as close to the community as possible. It's based on some very sketchy speculation on what the savings would be, and I can go into as much detail on that as you'd like. And I think it's a terrible idea. And I think given what happened this morning, the conversation, the quality of that meeting, I think it's really important that our representatives, unfortunately, I think Molly's the only one that's still here. Oh, and Tristan Talano, thanks, Steve. But it'll be in the front of the senators as well, and Becca was here. I don't think Jeanette White was, but the point is that I would like them to know how this community feels about it, and so that's why I'm asking for this resolution.
The motion is, the resolution is that the members of the Brattleboro Representative Town Meeting do not support efforts by the Vermont State Legislature to empower the State Board of Education to determine the existence of the Brattleboro Town School District. Dr. Copens.
Stu Copans, District 3. I want to speak very briefly to that because I think what Spoon said was eloquent about the importance of community. I think part of the reason we need so many aides and have so many problems in school is the progressive destruction of community in Brattleboro and in the country. And a move like consolidated school districts would further destroy the sense of community, and I absolutely support the motion.
Other discussion? Yes, Mr. Webster.
Don Webster, District 3. You may recall at the last town meeting, I introduced a resolution about a similar kind of bill, which had just barely passed by the House of Representatives Committee on Education, which basically says hold off, because you haven't given us enough information or details of how this worked, getting a sense of that. And luckily it did. Ironically, I did happen to hear from 2 representatives who heard about our resolution and actually read it. So I was pleased with that. Maybe David Deers will do the same. But I sat through the meeting this morning also, and I thought to myself, we have a budget here that's well presented, that's legitimately analyzed and scrutinized and supported by this community and the programs they have there. Town meeting, this school board will not be able to do that anymore. Your budget is going to come from a larger group in some fashion. There are a lot of details that still haven't been worked out, so you can't criticize specifics in many cases, but they're not going to be driving this budget, and this town meeting is out of business as far as dealing with education. The other small towns, when you think of town meeting and what it represents in smaller communities like Dummerston, Vernon, and others like that, they're going to be faced with the same thing. We're going to have folks from Brattleboro helping Vernon decide how their budget is. And we're going to have people from Dummerston suggesting we don't need a farm-to-school program or something like that. All kinds of details will be basically taken over by a larger group. And implicitly also means that the basic power and drive of the quality of education, which is, I believe, principals and local school teachers supported by the community, is going to move up the ladder. Policy decisions are going to start being made more educational by the superintendent and the State Board of Education. It's going to happen, and the other part of it is, too, is the sense of, that's just one deal. One final remark. I don't want to overload with facts and figures. I've looked into this, and it's bad in so many ways. But one of the features of Vermont, that's part of our economy, tourism and the rest, is the capacity of small towns to exist in this state. Over half the population lives in towns under 2,500 people. It doesn't bother Burlington. They've got their own school district anyway. They're already consolidated. They don't need us. They don't need to hear us. Frank Bryan, I can see him rolling over in his not yet grave about the importance of town meeting, would tell you that one of the reasons you go to a town meeting is partly to participate, among other things, in deciding school budgets. They're not going to do that anymore. What's that going to do to the pull of town meeting? What's it going to do to the sense of community when there's no school there, which has been arbitrarily taken away? There's lots of good reasons why consolidated has to take place in some ways. There's no doubt about it. There's some cases that are quality issues in small towns that can't afford to do it. But by taking a series of problems and solving them with a construct that applies to everybody just doesn't make any sense. So I'd urge support for David's resolution.
Further discussion on the resolution? If not, all those in favor of the resolution as proposed by David, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. You may be seated. And it overwhelmingly was adopted. Other business. Ms. Jill.
Oh, sorry. I'm on. So I'm not sure how this works, but I kind of came today thinking I would hear something about the police and fire and the next steps. So right, but am I the only one in the room that would like to have a better understanding of what is going to happen next? Everybody else is fine walking out of here?
Ms. Stahl-Tyler has interrogated the Board of Selectmen if they choose to be interrogated beyond which they already have during the course of the day.
In October 2012, the town meeting authorized $14.5 million in bonding authority to build out the three facilities, West Brattleboro Fire Station, Central Fire Station, and the downtown police station. Select Board borrowed the first $5 million of the $14 million and began that project. We hired an architect, we hired a project manager, we formed an oversight committee. We purchased the property at Custom Laundry. Plans were almost shovel-ready for the downtown fire station and for the West Brattleboro station, and we're working towards shovel-ready plans at the police station. The budget last year included $9 million in additional borrowing for moving that project to construction, and we anticipated moving to construction last summer. The budget was approved by town meeting, was rejected at referendum. We took the interest out of the budget, and then the budget was adopted in June 2014. Following the June 2014 adoption of a new budget, the Police Fire Committee reconsidered the options relating to the police fire project. They came back to us and told us that they didn't believe that the police station should be built out at the municipal center and rather should move up to Putney Road. The board approved that concept and approved putting money in the budget to move forward with that concept, but bond council said we couldn't do that without coming back to town meeting. There's a substantial minority, 2 out of the 5 select board members that don't believe the process has been fully vetted yet and that there's not full plans for moving forward at this time. We've asked the town manager to do his most thorough investigation, looking at all the plans in order to make his best recommendation to select board about what the best action steps would be going forward. It's my personal view that we need to come back to town meeting with a new plan for how renovations to the police fire facilities are going to unfold. And I do anticipate that after select board finishes its work with the town manager, we will do informational meetings and then have another town meeting seeking authority from town meeting, which I do think is a governmental body, about how we're going to spend whatever money we're going to spend to fix the police and fire facilities. I can't tell you that the other 4 select board members agree with that picture of what's going to happen going forward, but that's where I understand where we currently stand.
Any other business? Mr. Montgomery.
Tad Montgomery, District 2. Roughly 8.4 million vehicles pass through Brattleboro every year. That's 38,000 cars a day on Route 91. I am working with the Town Arts Committee to develop a proposal to turn that corridor, roughly 6 miles, into an art corridor and have creativity expressed in that zone. There is a proposal that has been written up about this, a 2-page, 1-page, 2-side proposal. It's on the table there, the low table, and on this back table. The intention is to create an experience for people as they pass through Brattleboro where they say, wow, what was that? To give them just a creative experience. Yes, there are issues. There are lots of issues in this. And we are thinking about those issues. We want more input in this. There could be many different types of art. There could be sculptures. There could be structures that are being renovated or upgraded, somehow have art incorporated into them. There could be lights. There could be plantings. There could be wildflower beds or flowering trees. issues, many issues with this. There's the billboard law. We'd have to be very careful around the billboard law. There's cost, there's ongoing maintenance. There is who decides what art is installed in this area. Lots of questions. To be successful, this project really needs the whole town to step up and say, yes, this is a good thing, let's do it. So I ask that folks take copies of this proposal, bring it home, ponder it, get back to me, get back to the Town Arts Committee. Let us know your thoughts and concerns with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Megas Russell.
Thank you, Emily Megas Russell, District 1. I just want to take this public opportunity to thank the police department under Chief Fitzgerald's leadership. I work in a mental health agency in town, and I've dealt with the police for the past 5 years. And the remarkable approach that they have been taking to working with folks who are struggling with safety because they are feeling unsafe, to minimize the amount of unsafe interventions that they use to further promote potentially a cycle of trauma and violence and safety, has minimized so much. And their willingness to take feedback and leadership and direction from the folks that they're serving, their community members and those with the skill set to be able to support them in doing their work, has been really remarkable. So I just want to thank the chief and his willingness to hear that, and also the police officers, and also say that I look forward to a special town meeting to be able to vote to give them a proper facility.
Is there any other non-binding business to come before the meeting? Ms. Anderson.
Town Arts Committee. May I speak to Mr. Montgomery's proposal?
Absolutely.
Thank you. The Town Arts Committee supports this initiative. We are in support of stating in the universally understood language of art that Brattleboro has an interesting story to tell. We invite our neighbors from near and far to engage in new dialogue with us and share in Brattleboro's offerings. This is what art does. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional other business, Ms. Davison.
So this relates to a suggestion I have about the process of the Select Board exploring ongoing consideration of the police fire project. And what I would request is what I wrote in the letter to the editor, is that the Select Board begin the whole process by having a series of public meetings explaining to the town, both the town reps and citizens, what has happened so far. The town oversight committee has been working for over a year. They have input for us. The decision about why not to rebuild on the municipal center is information that a lot of people in town don't know about. The reason not to try and build both police and fire stations together was dismissed, but we don't know exactly why that happened. I think in order to move forward, and I think it is good to move forward because most people in town support better facilities for the police and fire department. The problem is the cost. So I think that we, as a town, need to have some informational meetings before you come back with a new proposal. Let's have informational meetings for all the town reps, for all the people in town, and really allow people to ask questions and use those questions as input for you as you move ahead. So that's what I would request as a process, because I think we need that kind of a process before you come back with a new proposal for us. Thank you.
Is there other business to come, other non-binding business? Gary Carrier. I'll get right to you, John.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I am very concerned about the trouble we're having getting enough people to fill the slots for this meeting. It's now become something akin to a roundup. as we get ready to go to the meetings, the pre-town meetings, people are scurrying around trying to find enough people to fill the slots. I'm very concerned because I think this speaks badly of democracy. I would hope that the selectmen would look seriously at the various systems that are used by different people, different towns in different states to operate their democracy. Because I think we have a problem and we need to deal with it, and somehow we need to get these slots filled with people who are prepared to become educated in the problems and the issues of this town. Thank you.
Further issues that need to be brought up, Mr. Wilmerding.
Mr. Moderator, my friends and neighbors, I have been looking at that question and I have a proposal which I'd like to offer in good faith, which I think might address it. That the town resolve that the town should study the possibility and ramifications of subdividing our existing election districts into significantly smaller election wards or precincts, such that town representatives would be elected by and represent much smaller neighborhood areas rather than entire legislative districts at large. And I've already spoken with you about that, and I asked you to speak with the town attorney about it at some point, and I'd like to offer that as a text. I hope it's seconded.
Do you have a copy of this, Ms. Wood? You're offering this as a resolution. Resolved that the town should study the possibility and ramifications of subdividing our existing election districts into significantly smaller election wards or precincts, such that town representatives would be elected by and represent much smaller neighborhood areas rather than entire legislative districts at large. Is there a second to the resolution? Is there discussion? If not, all the way in the back. Yes, sir.
Yes, Dill McKinnon, District 2. As one of the recent Democratic cattle from the roundup. And I think also at 30 years old, I'm the youngest member here. Now, absent the experience and wisdom gained most else has. The majority, I think all but one of my signatures I got for my membership here were within sight of my house. So I do like the idea of having the districts smaller to encourage more regional participation. The questions I asked, I wasn't asking as many questions about larger issues because everyone who signed for me so I could get my name on the ballot were asking about conditions of the roads. That's what I was bringing forth, trying to represent my little neighborhood in District 2. Yeah, so I guess it's not even a question, it's just a statement. Thank you.
Further discussion, Dr. Copens, on the resolution.
This is just, oh, okay, I'm sorry. I was going to have a suggestion, which was to provide childcare for town meeting.
No, we're going to talk just for a minute. Let's conclude this resolution, okay? This is a resolution that is being offered by Mr. Wilmerding. I'll read it one more time, that the town should study the possibility and ramifications of subdividing our existing election districts into significantly smaller election wards or precincts, such that town representatives would be elected by and represent much smaller neighborhood areas rather than entire legislative districts at large. Is there further discussion on that resolution? Mr. Chapman.
Hi, Chris Chapman, District 1. I would just like to express my hope that there will be a big distinction made between the quality of the people who seek to be elected and the quantity we want here. I find that this meeting is really a fine deliberative body. No, we don't have all the people we wanted here, but we do have the issues well ventilated in a civilized manner in which I think we are all proud. And so if we really want to get more people in, are we willing to sacrifice some of the quality for quantity? Are we assuming that's going to be a qualitative difference in the meeting? Thank you.
Further discussion on Mr. Wilmerding's resolution? If not, all those in favor of Mr. Wilmerding's resolution, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed to Mr. Wilmerding's resolution, please rise. The noes appear to have it. The noes do have it, and the resolution does not carry. Mr. Wilmerding.
I won't call for a division. My purpose is to get the idea out there, but I do have another one with apologies briefly. Perhaps you will discuss it, deal with it as briefly. Resolve that the town, and we heard sentiment to this effect earlier, resolve that the town should consider the possibility of helping to establish a community foundation or consolidated fund to which we would gradually devolve our current practice and responsibility of supporting local human services and/or other nonprofit organizations.
All right. Mr. Wilmerding has offered the following resolution: that the town should consider the possibility of helping to establish a community foundation or consolidated fund to which we would gradually devolve our current practice and responsibility of supporting local human services and/or other nonprofit organizations. Is there a second? Second. Is there discussion with regard to Mr. Wilmerding's resolution? Ms. McLaughlin.
Elizabeth McLaughlin, District 3. I just think that's a terrible idea because we would eventually not fund these very needy organizations, and it would be up to the whim of private charity, which, although it does support these things, I think each of these organizations depends on the funds of each of these towns. I know the drop-in center depends on the funds from each municipality to continue their very important work.
Is there further discussion? Ms. Melton.
Paula Melton, District 1. I just have a question. If there were our own personal Rockefeller out there who came to the town and said, I have $10,000 and I'd like to give it to the human services budget, is that a possibility and is it tax deductible?
I guess that would be a question for Mr. O'Connor, Mr. Elwell, perhaps. I guess if somebody wanted to give you some money, would you take it? I don't know.
Yes, and it's tax deductible to the extent that it would be for that particular donor if they were donating to a 501c3.
Yes. Jill, go ahead.
A similar question. I don't quite understand the purpose of the idea, because right now we can give directly to any of these same human agencies. So why would we want to, as a private citizen, give to the town so the town would distribute? Why wouldn't I just go directly to that agency?
Ms. Stahl-Tyler interrogates Mr. Wilmerding.
Well, let me answer your question with a question. If a Rockefeller can get a tax deduction for a charitable donation to the town, can your taxpayers get a tax deduction for the amount of the town budget that's being given charitably to local nonprofit organizations? I think that is the point. I believe in the division, a natural division between the public, private, and charitable sectors. And I think that we mix business here in a way that's sometimes uncomfortable when we're discussing how much tax money to give to local charitable organizations. I think that's sort of problematic in some ways. But I've also listened very carefully to Mr. Chapman's prior proposal to allow the town or propose that the town ask people for charitable support for various parts of our activities. And I think we should listen to him more carefully and consider the source, because he's part of a firm that counsels people on their investments. And other members of that firm over time have been extremely helpful to charitable organizations and initiatives in this community. I agree that the municipal government, as it's now constituted, needs to concentrate managerially on the nuts and bolts of municipal government and the administration of services. And I think that this is an idea worth looking into. I'm not asking that you decide it now. I think that we should look into it because we may be able to open the door to more support, and I would not for one moment suggest that we stop all flow of funding to these organizations. I think it would have to be studied carefully to see if we could gradually devolve the support to a growing flow of charitable support.
The proposed resolution is that the town should consider the possibility of helping to establish a community foundation or consolidated fund to which we would gradually devolve our current practice and responsibility of supporting local human services and/or other nonprofit organizations. Are you ready for that vote? Oh, no? Are you ready for that vote? Or you do want to? Okay, Ms. Kornheiser.
You used the word devolve, and the federal government has devolved this responsibility to the states, and the states have devolved this responsibility to the towns. And therein is the problem of the poverty and the homelessness and everything that's happening in this town that the human services budget is going towards. It's that everyone continues to devolve responsibility. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Mr. Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm going to be brief. I'm Chris Chapman, District 1. Because I'd like to see this discussion, I would love to see this discussion at a different time when we can all be fresh and perhaps with more information. First, let me just talk about the tax deductibility. Let's not confuse the 501c3 organization with the town. The town is not a 501c3, but what makes our, if I'm not mistaken, and Bob Fisher can set me right, but what makes our payments of property taxes deductible is Section 170 of the code, Internal Revenue Code. That's the one that governs how we pay taxes. That says that a contribution to charitable education, scientific, municipal organization, not in those particular words, is deductible. So if you gave money to the town, it would be tax deductible, as though you were giving to a charity, but you're not giving to a charity. Section 170 says your contribution is tax deductible, even though it's not going to a 501c3. Okay? And the second thing is that the idea I've come up with is not to create the one that I have been hoping that the Select Board would be willing even to discuss is one where we recognize that the town really needs more money than it has. This is a tough one, especially the question being really brought to bear with the police fire station. More needs than we can really afford. There is such a long history of giving in town, and Mr. Reed's recent amazing gifts, the amazing circumstance here of a fellow who appeared to be living in near poverty and was frugal, gave $1 million to the library and $4.8 million to the hospital, is emblematic of something we have not only in Brattleboro but across the United States as the most generous society in the world, and probably in the history of the world, and who lives at a time when, whose gift was also emblematic of a couple other facts, that there is now going on a transfer of wealth from one generation to the next that is larger than ever in the history of civilization, estimated to be about $50 trillion over the next 50 years or so. I would like very much also to help us transform the nature of of taxation. Government has been demonized over the past 30 years. It is not to be demonized, as this body has amply shown today and in every year that it is met. And local government's very effective. What I'm suggesting is that the town simply say that it welcomes contributions over and above property tax obligations and from people who would be giving, who are not property taxpayers here. Because Brattleboro is quite special, and the history of Brattleboro is amply illustrated by the fact that people simply love Brattleboro. I'm not suggesting that we should budget on it, because we can't. It's episodic and often way unexpected, as we just saw with Mr. Reed's gifts. But there is not simply, what somebody termed the Rockefeller type out there, but everybody. Who here wouldn't, as simply a matter of simply as a matter of community mindedness, give a little more than they're obligated, if we simply made that a cultural value of the town by virtue of a very simple vote of either the select board or the town meeting or a town-wide referendum that says, we would welcome this. We don't need a community foundation. We don't need to complicate this. With all great respect to the initiative from Mr. Wilmerding to create that, I don't think we should vote for it today here in this non-binding fashion. I don't think we should vote for it. I think we should be thinking in a much larger term in terms of what our roles are as individuals with respect to our community beyond that of taxation. This is a community that is rich in volunteers, and as we have seen today, rich in thinkers. And we can be richer financially simply with a tweak in the social paradigm we have of taxation. How I would love to have this conversation with the select board if they would agree to entertain an articulated draft of a resolution on that fact. So, thank you.
Are you ready for the vote on this question? Ms. Baboulis.
Dora Boubalis, District 3. I just want to, I agree with what Chris just said. I do want to say that some of the funding in the human services budget is just people requesting things because they need them, and there's some organizations that aren't getting other kinds of funding. But some of the funding is basically matching funds that are required by federal and state grants that organizations get. And that would probably still have to come out of taxes. You wouldn't be able to have a special fund because it probably wouldn't meet that. And I guess we'd have to get an opinion from, from the town attorney, who wouldn't be ready to answer that right now. But I'm thinking that that's probably the way it is. And so the idea of sort of pushing all of that into some sort of private fund may not necessarily work.
Mr. Webster?
Mr. Moderator, I call the question.
Okay, Mr. Webster's called the question on the resolution. All those in favor of ceasing debate on this issue, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed to ceasing debate on the issue, please rise. You may be seated, and debate has ceased. The question is, shall the resolution as presented by Mr. Wilmerding, that the town should consider the possibility of helping to establish a community foundation or consolidated fund to which we would gradually devolve our current practice and responsibility of supporting local human services and/or other nonprofit organizations. All those in favor of his resolution, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. You may be seated, and you have defeated Mr. Wilmerding's resolution. Is there any other business to come before the meeting? Mr. Kaler in the back.
Hello, is mic on? Oh, good. I've sat through the meeting all day for two reasons. One, because I'm fascinated by town meeting. I was a town meeting rep for about 10 years, and it's a wonderful process to follow. Now, do I have to moo like a cow? Or but I also wanted to stay and have an opportunity to speak very, very briefly about pay-as-you-throw. You all know it's coming. It's going to happen by July 1st of this year. We've been working hard on it for a number of months. There will be 4 public meetings between now and the start of pay-as-you-throw. There will be the sale of additional curbside compost carts between now and the start of pay-as-you-throw, so we hope many more people join in on curbside composting. I hope you all picked up information. It's at a table right by the front door. If you haven't, there might be some left. You can pick it up when you leave. One of those sheets as a space to list questions or comments, and I would certainly welcome them, and the Pay-As-You-Throw Committee would welcome them. If you have anything to say or question, just leave a phone or email address, and someone will get back to you. And it also, your questions might help us better prepare for questions we might be receiving when we have our public meetings. Thank you.
Further issues or questions for any other non-binding business? Yes, Dr. Copens.
I'm not going to make a resolution because that would take much time. Would like to make a suggestion to actually both school board and town select board that they consider the possibility of providing child care for town meeting reps who attend town meeting. Not for my sake, but I think it would get us many younger people able to come.
Thank you. Further discussion, Mr. Dimes?
I think it's great that so many of my fellow reps have stayed close so late in the meeting to hear the additional proposals which were not on the ballot. And this is, I think this is the best part of RTM, if you ask me. And it is, I can't remind the people who've left, but it is part of our mission. Indeed, the charter gives us the duty to, what to say? The representative town meeting is a source of new ideas, proposals, and guidance for the town. I think we should, like today, consider ourselves as having executed that duty very well, and I hope we keep doing it that way. Thank you.
Further discussion, Mr. Agave?
Neither the select board's report in the annual report or the planning department's report in the annual report spoke of the accomplishments this year, the progress that we have made on our town plan. I would like to point out, in fact, that our town charter requires that report. It's actually a statute. And it was a violation of that statute not to have written that report for the town plan. And I hope that next year, if there is progress on the town plan, or if not, but to report on what you've done.
Other business, Mr. Gould?
Yeah, I know we're all tired and I really want to go home too, but I feel like we have to do our job and cover a brief policy direction towards next steps on police fire. I've served on that committee, but I'm not here to act in that, excuse me, that sort of personal capacity. But I was struck when I sat down in West Brattleboro in District 1 talked to our other District 1 members and the other members of our community, and there were a couple things that got unanimous support that I feel like in a non-binding referendum we need to do our job and put that forward for the benefit of the new town manager and for the select board as they plan next steps. So I'm not very good at crafting a resolution, but I tried here. And I think this should be a quick up or down vote, just a straw poll to see if other members or districts do share the fairly unanimous impressions that came forward in West Brattleboro. So be it resolved that the members of the representative town meeting are doing their civic duty by providing policy direction to the select board and new town manager in regards to the next steps in our plan to provide police and fire upgrades. Specifically, the District 1 reps would like to offer the following design and process guidelines. Number 1, prove that some combination of existing land cannot be used before major new sites are considered. Number 2, this planning process may need a higher level of transparency and documentation. Number 3, don't separate police and fire. And number 4, this as a body, we need to set a budget that we can manage to so that this body can see it come back for return, for management, for design, without the sort of reversals that we've had over the past few years that could compromise our credit and even call into question our ability as a form of governance to move forward like we need to. So that's a summary of the non-binding directions that the West Brattleboro caucus felt pretty strongly about.
Are you presenting that, Mr. Gould, in resolution form?
Yes, I am.
Do you wish the body
Well, I'm trying to. I'm not sure if I've done it correctly.
Do you want the body to adopt a resolution based upon that?
Yes.
Then I need to see the written.
It's pretty chicken scratch.
Yeah, you're almost as bad as I am. Okay, is there a second to Mr. Gould's resolution? Is there any discussion before we have a vote? Mr. McLaughlin. Oh, just a second.
I thought that the purpose of much of our deliberations over the many years in town meetings was to give the most flexibility to the thinking and planning for the police and fire and not to impose strictures upon them. And so I would not be in favor of such a resolution.
Is there further discussion with regard to Mr. Yeah, point of information, Mr. Sage.
I'll direct this to Mr. Gould. What did you mean in that by do not separate police and fire?
Oh. Yes, you may answer what your intent was, Mr. Gould.
So in serving on the committee, we have completed a shovel-ready, like Mr. Gardenstein says, plans for the fire station. The police station project has been stuck with a lot of challenges with the older building and having a modern essential facility. It would be easy from a political point of view to move forward with what we had and do something for the fire department, and we all want to see something get done, but our fear, or my fear, is that we won't do anything for the police station if we do a major project. So I joined a police fire committee, and I intend to advocate that we come up with a comprehensive solution for both. That's what I meant.
Mr. Barber.
I'm in agreement. I was at that little meeting and facilitated it, and it was wonderful to hear the ideas that came bubbling out of the group. My take on this is that we take a step back and think of these projects as not police, fire, but these people are all our first responders. They often respond to the same event together. Not always, but very often. The personnel in each department are, I would suspect, about equally exposed to events that could cause PTSD. There's a lot of stress based on what they have to do. Both departments are served by both men and women. Both departments need facilities for lockers, training rooms, whatever, and they also need to be able to provide comfortable facilities for our two genders, however many genders. I don't care. So my approach to this is to step back and say, is there a way of putting them to, and also, we hear a lot about the two cultures. There's the police culture, the fire culture. Well, maybe that's true. The departments can speak to that. But I would be willing to bet that somewhere under their skin, whether you're a cop or a firefighter, you are both comrades in arms, and you are both, you have both stepped forward to keep us safe. And we need you to keep us safe. But we can't afford the moon. So what I'm saying is there may be opportunities here to save some money. And it may be, or it may not be, that we can ask these folks to operate out of the same facility, occupying maybe almost the same ground footprint. I think it should be looked at. Thanks.
Mr. Scholes. There. I think there's a couple of the points of Eli's resolution are kind of maybe contradictory. To not separate police fire, in other words, what I understand that to mean is to do them all at once, and at the same time something that can be managed in our budget may not be possible. And one of the things that may be determined is that we need to go forward with one project or two of them right away, let that get paid down a little bit so that the bond payments are receding, and then do the next one. And that's one of the many ideas that was put forward. I think the point I'd like to make is that we haven't really agreed on how exactly to proceed. We've got a majority, but we'd rather not. We'd rather make sure we're all right and we're all on the same page. We also now have a fully staffed town administration, and a really strong and clear commitment to work through all these things. And just in the comments that we've heard just now, there are several different proposals for what should happen or what might happen. And what we're going to be doing is looking at what might happen or what should happen and coming up with a proposal. And people have asked for a series of public meetings, and that's exactly what we've been talking about and planning on doing. And I'm not sure that this, well, it's not a binding resolution, so it doesn't bind us. But the point I'm trying to make is that we're going to do the best job we possibly can to get these facilities upgraded as quickly as we possibly can. And we can pass any number of resolutions, but we're going to be going full speed ahead with it anyway. And I think well, that's enough.
Further discussion with regard to Mr. Gould's resolution. Mr. Gardenstein.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. A core question that the town of Brattleboro needs to make a decision on is how to upgrade our emergency services facilities consistent with our taxpayers' ability to pay. The questions Mr. Gould has posed are interesting. They're important to look at, but they by no means occupy the field of the things we need to look at. I'm opposed to this resolution. It's on the Select Board's plate to look at all of these issues and re-present these issues back to the town through informational meetings and to town meeting.
Mr. Gould's motion is, be it resolved that the members of the round of representative town meeting are doing their civic duty by providing policy direction to the Select Board and new town manager in regards to next steps in our plans to provide police and fire upgrades. Specifically, the District 1 reps would like to offer the following design and process guidelines. 1, provide that some combination of existing land cannot be used before major new sites are considered. The planning process may need a higher level of transparency and documentation, i.e., a new RFP. 3, don't separate police and fire. 4, set a budget that we can manage so that the body can see it return for approval without the sort of reversals that the last few years have called this form of government into question. I think that got the essence of it, did it, Mr.? Are you ready for that question? If Mr. Webster.
I will be short. I have no capacity to vote on this. I do not have the knowledge of the dimensions of the issues and any of the details that are presented. What I hear is a thoughtful presentation from some folks in District 1. They certainly should bring that to the Select Board or whoever the appropriate person to do it in. But as a matter of governance, I can't see our group micromanaging or setting guidelines or restrictions on a process like this at 5 o'clock in the afternoon when most people don't really all understand all the issues. So I would urge support of what Mr. Garten said and defeat the motion.
Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor of Mr. Gould's resolution, as I have just read it, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. And you may be seated, and the resolution has failed. Is there anything else to come before the meeting? Mr. Sage.
Very briefly, for those of you that know me, probably understand I'm just as frustrated as you, if not more so, in regards to this. We do keep getting updates from the town, the governing body of the town, and I just want to say thank you to the Select Board and Patrick and Peter for your work on this project as it's going forth.
Further discussion or debate? Chair would entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? All those in favor, please rise. Thank you very much.